Rachel turned slowly to the left, trying to move away from the heat. Her hand touched something cold as she moved her head to look at it. She felt the stabbing pain in the back of her neck. She winces as the pain cascaded down her back. The noise from the blaring smoke detector increased her anxiety. What? She turned to look at her hand and saw the smoke snaking under the door. What the goddammit? She whispered as she tried to get up. Frowning in confusion, she looked around. Fear raced through her veins as the smoke detector continued to blare, sending bursts of panic throughout her body. Her eyes watered as she moved towards the hallway, the thick smoke obscuring her vision. Her eyes watered as she moved towards the living room. She paused. There appeared to be no fire in the living room area, although visibility was not the greatest due to smoke seeping in through the hallway door. Rachel cautiously opened the door to the hallway. It was dark and smoky, but she could still make out the front entrance of the building. She started to walk towards the front entrance and noticed that the smoke was getting thicker, making her feel nervous. She opened the door of the bedroom and took a quick look around. She saw her designer leather jacket hanging on the back of the door and immediately knew what she had to do. She grabbed the jacket and ran into the bathroom, throwing the jacket in the sink and turning on the taps full force. As the water began to flow, Rachel could hear the sound of footsteps coming from the hallway. She quickly turned off the water and listened intently, trying to determine the source of the noise. She pulled the jacket from the puddle and put it on, grimacing as the cold leather touched her overheated skin. Looking around the bedroom, she saw her backpack and a train pass. She grabbed the bag quickly, snatching her phone from the charger, and marched to the other side of the apartment. The smoke was still thick, but she could make out the hallway leading to the front entrance of the building. She turned to look at the window, opened it wider, then stepped out onto the narrow ledge. She made her way slowly down the narrow ledge until she could jump to the ground. Rachel hurried away from the building, half running and half walking, as the flames licked the walls and smoke billowed out of the windows. She felt a chill run through her body that had nothing to do with her wet clothes. She had no idea how long she had been running for when she stopped to catch her breath and take in her surroundings. Everything around her was unfamiliar. She heard a noise in the distance and realized it was the train. Rachel felt a glimmer of hope that maybe she could escape this way.
She started walking towards it, pushing through the throng of people, keeping her head down while furtively looking around. The adrenaline had started to wear off, and she felt a sense of dread, along with the realization that someone had tried to kill her. She shuddered and grasped the wet leather jacket tightly around her body. As Rachel made her way towards the train, her stomach clenched. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being followed. She turned around, but there was no one there. She quickened her pace, her heart pounding in her chest. Rachel ran down the stairs of the train station, her heart pounding in her chest. She had no idea where she was going, but she was determined to find a way out. She had to get away, or else she would surely be killed. As she reached the landing, she looked around frantically, trying to make out the signs pointing towards different platforms and destinations. As she walked through the terminal, she kept her head down and prayed that nobody would recognize her. Suddenly, she heard a loud buzzer sound signaling an outgoing train, and a wave of relief washed over her. She quickly made her way over to the ticket kiosk and purchased a ticket, not even bothering to check the destination. As soon as the ticket was in her hand, Rachel raced back up the stairs and jumped onto the train as the doors were starting to close. She looked around at all of the other passengers with a newfound sense of determination and made her way to the back. Uneasily, she looked at the station stops. Berlin Central would be 2 stops away. Rachel sat up with a jolt. That would be her stop. She could then change trains and make her way out of the country. Her heart raced as she thought of all the possibilities. She remembered an old friend who lived in Zurich, and thinking quickly, she decided to go there. She felt a sense of hope as the train slowly rolled into Berlin Central Station. She pushed her hand into the side pocket of her backpack and felt something soft. She slowly pulled it out, feeling the warmth and comfort as she recognized the silky scarf that her grandmother had given her. Gently, she placed it around her neck, burying her face momentarily in it as she straightened her back and walked to the train doors. She focused on the signs as she exited and walked towards the westbound train platform. She stopped at the magazine stand, buying a newspaper, a chocolate bar, and a phone charger as she walked to the counter. She spotted a shelf with hoodies in the corner and picked one up, paying for everything before walking out the other side to the ticket counter. The ticket counter was busy, but Rachel fidgeted as she continued to discreetly look to the exits.
The ticket counter was busy, but Rachel fidgeted as she continued to discreetly look to the exits. When she finally reached the front, she asked for a one-way ticket to Zurich. The ticket agent looked up at her.
"You just missed the non-stop," he said. "The next one will make a few stops, or you can wait an hour."
Rachel looked up the exit. "That's fine," she said, trying for nonchalance. He paused for a moment before punching some buttons on the computer and printing out a ticket. Rachel took it gratefully and made her way to the platform, scanning the crowd for any signs of danger. As she boarded the train, she noticed that she was still wearing her wet leather jacket. The smell of smoke filled her nostrils. Discreetly, she looked at the other passengers and walked to the rear of the car. As the train wound its way through the German countryside, Rachel tried to relax and calm her racing thoughts. She looked out the window, watching the scenery go by in a blur. The sun was starting to set, casting a warm golden light over the fields and forests outside. It was a beautiful sight, but Rachel couldn't fully appreciate it. Her mind was too preoccupied with the danger she was in. Suddenly, she heard a loud noise from the other end of the train, and her heart leapt into her throat. She looked around frantically, trying to see what was happening. Then, she heard a voice, calm and reassuring, telling the passengers that there was nothing to worry about, just a small delay. Rachel felt a sense of relief wash over her, but she couldn't shake the feeling of unease. She stood with her back against the wall, her eyes flickering around the room, glancing at different groups of people while staying out of the way. She slowly unbuttoned her jacket, removed her hoodie from the bag and placed it over her head, tugging it down. She then wrapped the jacket in a ball and put it in her backpack. Glancing at her phone, she tapped impatiently for the screen to light up. She looked down at the newspaper in her lap, scanning the headlines without really reading them.
Elise stood at the counter, feeling someone staring at her. She smiled as the barista placed her drink in front of her, then looked over to her right to see a woman staring at her. Thinking, do I know her? Then said, I am dying for this. The woman walked up and said, "I know what you mean." "Thanks, Jim," she said to a barista, then moved her hand to collect her order of ginger tea and double shot espresso, and smiled as the barista winked at her. She nodded to the woman and then walked to the hospital. Later that night, as she was driving out of the parking lot, she was about to make a right turn when she stopped and looked to the left, where she saw a black Charger. The car was parked, the lights were on, and under the street lamp she could make out a woman, distracted by the ringing of her phone and Siri announcing that Jesse was calling. She pulled out and merged with traffic, making her way to her apartment. Making her way to her apartment. Making her way to her apartment.
Why don't we meet downtown? It's a great night to distress and celebrate. What do you say? Yeah, that sounds nice. I could use a break from all this craziness. What time should I meet you? How about 7? Will that work? We can go to the wine bar on the corner, the one you like. Yeah, that's great. She responded as she looked back to change lanes before turning around, looking down to change the address in the GPS. She noticed the black Charger trying to merge with traffic as a yellow cab blocked the turn. What happened? Are you okay? Actually, can I park in your garage? Something weird just happened, and I'm not sure it's safe for me to be out here alone. What do you mean weird? Don't know, just wired this week. I'll see you soon, and we can talk about it then. I will go downstairs now, she said, as she hung up the phone. They picked a table by the window, facing the door. Jesse said, "How wonderful that you are going to be the youngest researcher. Let's celebrate before they give you the Nobel Prize." Elise, smiling, replied, "That sounds great. I'm so excited to finally have my hard work recognized. I could definitely use a drink right now." She then added, "Let's see what the report says. The embargo will be lifted sometime this week. So we'll see if I'm just a cock-up." Her eyes twinkled as she smiled. "Oh, I'm sure it will be great. Let's just enjoy tonight and not worry too much about tomorrow, okay?" Jesse reaches over and pats her hand. "You got this. I know." From your lips to God's ears. Agreed. The server came over. "What can I get you, ladies?" she said. Looking at Elise, Jesse jumped in. "We are celebrating. I'll take a glass of Chardonnay, please." Elise said, "I'll have a gin and tonic." Jesse said the server left with their orders. Jesse turned to Elise and asked, "So, tell me more about this research you've been working on. Are you nervous about the results being revealed?" Elise replied, "Yes, I'm definitely anxious. But I'm also confident that my work will be well received. Here's to hoping for good news. So, what is you so wired? You never usually want to park in the garage." "Just a weird feeling. I can't shake the sensation that I'm being watched." Jesse has a handful of peanuts halfway to her mouth and stops midair, saying, "What?"
I'm sure it's nothing. But this morning when I stopped for coffee, I felt like I saw the same person from the night before at the supermarket. Funny enough, I only remembered her face because she was wearing the same loafers as Rachel. She picked up a gallon of milk. For now, I'm starting to feel like it's not a coincidence because when I pulled out of the parking lot at the office, there was a Charger on the other side of the street. And when I turned to switch lanes to get here, the car did the same.
Well, a Charger did drive past you when you entered the garage.
Nervously, she looked around.
Come on, let's get out of here. We'll go to my place.
Yes, I think that's a good idea. They quickly left the wine bar.
Don't worry, we'll figure it out. Come on, let's go this way.
She grabbed her hand and pulled her to the back. They made their way through the side door of the wine bar and walked to the back street to access the rear door of Jesse's apartment.
Inside the apartment, Elise looked around at the various monitors flickering while Jesse sat at the desk, punching a few keys. Jesse sensed her unease and asked, "Do you think it has something to do with the research project?" Elise looked up in a halted voice and said, "I'm not sure the research. Nothing in it should inflame anyone. It's just findings, methods to cure. If it's related to the research, then that would be really bad." Her eyes glazed over at the implication. Jesse pointed to the screen.
That was the charger right behind you when you entered the parking garage, Jesse said, looking down at her phone and typing some more, bringing up the view outside of Elise's office when she had exited the building. She pointed to the charger. Elise looked at the screen and over at Jesse, wringing her hands anxiously. Her voice trembled as she asked, Who are these people?"
"Have you spoken to Rachel?"
"No, generally we speak daily. But she said that she was going to be busy traveling to Berlin, and with everything happening around the lab, we have been playing phone tag."
"I am running the facial recognition software," she said, as the red light flashed across the screen with a beep. Pointing to the screen, she looked up at Elise. "Come sit." She said, "No one can get to us here." She nodded her head to the screen. "Does she look familiar?" she asked.
Looked up, seeing a woman in black flak jacket and aviators.
"Not quite," she said.
Jesse looked down at the screen, then pressed a few more keys. The view changed, showing a regular suburban mom in cutoffs and a t-shirt. Wait, that's her, the woman from the coffee shop. I know that was my Justin Faster. The road of night is was the pardon very my phone the viewing whether stories of the stories hearst.
You sure pausing, she toggled a few more keys.
Yes, her lips quavering. Who is she?
Looking up. Well, I will be damned, it's too clean. Let me make a few calls.
How about some tea? Jesse said, moving towards the kitchen.
My housekeeper was here today, so why don't you stay here tonight? The guest room should have clean sheets, she added. Elise replied. Tea sounds great, thank you.
Jesse picked up the phone, spoke softly on the other end, then hung up and stood up to give Elise a hug.
Don't worry, he'll be here in an hour, she said.
Noah's voice cuts through the tension like a knife, his words laced with urgency and a hint of danger. Noah said, "Don't worry. We have an elite team of security professionals patrolling the perimeter of the event and guards stationed at every entrance and exit to ensure no one can get in or out without authorization." Mallory looked at Jesse, her expression serious. "Let's have some additional background on the staff catering the event as a precaution," she suggested. Jesse nodded in agreement. "Good idea," she said. She quickly began gathering information on each of the staff members who would be working at the event. Mallory watched her approvingly, knowing they had to take every precaution to ensure the event went off without a hitch. Noah looks at Elise and Jesse and says, "We will be with you 24 hours here and at the hospital." Elise looked at Noah questioningly. "What about at my apartment?" she asked. Noah smiled reassuringly. "We'll make sure you have extra protection there as well," he said. "You can rest easy knowing that you're safe." Jesse looked to Noah, her brow furrowed in confusion. "I thought you were coming alone. Who is Mallory?" she asked. "Noah, when you told me that she was being followed, I brought on extra help." "Noah, she is my oldest and dearest friend. I don't want anything to happen to her." Noah looked at Elise, his expression softening. "Why don't you get some rest?" he suggested. "We can handle the rest of the preparations." Elise nodded tiredly, grateful for Noah's understanding. She turned to leave but hesitated, bite in her lip. "Are you sure?" she asked, not wanting to leave them without her help. Noah smiled reassuringly and nodded. "We'll be fine," he said. "You need to get some rest so that you can be in top form for tomorrow." Elise smiled gratefully and left the room. As Elise left the room, Mallory turned to Jesse and said, "We have to find out who hired this woman to track Elise." Jesse nodded as her fingers flew over the keyboard. "Got it, I'm in," she said. Noah asked, "In where?" "Here it is. Looks like they were hired by a company based in Berlin." Jesse replied. Mallory exclaimed, "Berlin." She walked over to the monitor and peered down. "I've seen this company before. They are ruthless." Noah inquired, "How ruthless?" Mallory answered, "Weapons, guns, and chemicals, whatever it takes." Jesse asked in frustration, "How are we going to secure the event from all this?" She pointed at the screen. Mallory queried,
Why would they be after Elise? Raising her head, Jesse replied, "Take your pick. Her team is supposed to release some watershed research findings on cancer in a few days."
Mallory queried, "Why would they be after Elise?" Raising her head, Jesse replied, "Take your pick. Her team is supposed to release some watershed research findings on cancer in a few days." Although, she paused. Elise says she doesn't believe it should inflame anymore. Noah suggested, "A cure would cut into the profits of several large corporations." Mallory raised her eyebrow, looking at Jesse, and asked, "And?" "She is dating Jonathan Wood's daughter, the investor Jonathan Woods. He is also a researcher on the team and her mentor." "Where is she now?" "Not sure, she travels a lot." Looking at Noah, "Perhaps we can stir the pot." "What did you have in mind?" "The only way to get to the bottom of this in the time we have is to offer them something." She points to the screen. "I have an idea. We can use my hacking skills to set up Mallory as a weapons expert looking to sell explosives." Looking to Mallory, he nods. The setup worked, and Jesse made contact with the team that was trailing Elise. She had only to convince them that they would receive weapons immediately at 2:30 a.m. that morning. Jesse received a phone call. The men wanted her to meet them post-haste, apprehensive about meeting the mercenaries in the wee hours of the morning in the winter-cold city. Jesse declined, and the men instead settled for the more welcoming morning hours. Mallory suggested they get some rest, nothing that the following day would be long. Noah then asked Jesse for the keys to her SUV, to which she replied by handing him the fob and telling him it was in the garage. The following morning, Noah and Mallory met the mercenaries in a deserted warehouse in the Bronx. Noah had loaded a few boxes of sample weapons in the back of Jesse's Land Rover, and Mallory walked up to the lead guy as he popped the truck open. "I am so happy to connect with you. I had a job fall through, and now I want to get rid of these." The lead guy looked her up and down and said, "I would let you work on me anytime, honey." The other mercenary, a burly man with a scar across his cheek, turned to Noah and said, "These weapons are impressive, but we need to see more before we make a deal. Can you deliver on the rest of the order?" Noah hesitated, trying to think of a way to stall for time. Mallory said, "Of course, it will just take a few days to gather the rest of the weapons." Scarface replied, "We don't have a few days. Our employer is paying us a lot of money to finish this job ASAP." Noah's heart raced. He had to think of something fast.
Our employer is paying us a lot of money to finish this job ASAP. Noah's heart raced. He had to think of something fast. He walked back to the side table where he'd seen the guy place his phone and casually placed his next to it. Pressing the button that Jesse had showed him to initiate the cloning process, Mallory stepped in closer to shield his actions and said, "Sounds like you guys have a great job lineup. Do you need any extra muscle?" As Noah finished the cloning process, he felt a sense of relief wash over him. They had managed to successfully clone the mercenary's phone and gather valuable information about their employer and their mission. But he knew they couldn't let their guard down yet. Trust was a precious commodity in their line of work, and he had to be careful about who he shared this information with. Noah walked up and said, "If you take the lot, we can cut our fees." He pointed to the boxes in the SUV. The lead guy rubbed his beard and said, "We don't need any help right now, just the weapons." Noah replied, "Fine. These should be more than enough to get the job done. Just pay me for this now, and I will have some additional toys for you by tomorrow." Mallory watched as the lead guy walked over to the back of the Land Rover and lifted out the carton. He turned to Noah with a smug look on his face. Scarface looked at Mallory and said, "We don't need any more help, but we'll take those weapons off your hands. How much do you want for them?" Mallory named a price, and Scarface nodded in agreement. As they began to load the weapons into their van, Noah and Mallory exchanged a knowing glance. They had just taken a huge risk, but it had paid off. Now they had the intel they needed to take down the organization behind this dangerous mission. Noah and Mallory left the warehouse, taking a local street to the Throg's Neck Bridge to return to Jesse's apartment. Mallory suggested, "We should park the car a little ways off." Noah agreed. "Good idea. Let's park by the port. I have a spot there, and then we can hop on the subway over to Jesse's." Noah couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. He couldn't put his finger on it, but he felt like they were missing a crucial piece of information. Mallory sensed his unease and said, "What's wrong?" Noah hesitated before replying, "I don't know. It's just, something doesn't feel right. We have the intel we need, but I can't help feeling like we're missing something important." Mallory nodded in agreement. "Trust your instincts," she said. "We'll figure this out. But for now, let's focus on analyzing the data." Walking into the apartment, she noticed Elise in a hoodie with her hair up in a ponytail, staring aimlessly as she held the coffee cup close to her body.
Walking into the apartment, she noticed Elise in a hoodie, with her hair up in a ponytail, staring aimlessly as she held the coffee cup close to her body. She looked like she had not slept well. Jesse was pounding at her keyboard. Noah walked over and dropped his phone in front of her. "I think the clone worked," he said. Jesse grabbed the phone and plugged it into her computer. Mallory placed a bag of bagels and cream cheese on the table. "I brought us some bagels," she said. "Is there more coffee?" she asked Elise.
Yes. Let me get you a mug.
Mallory split the bagels open and began to lavishly smear cream cheese. Then she placed one in front of Jesse, leaving the rest on the table. Mallory pulled up a chair by Jesse's desk while stuffing a bagel in her mouth. She chewed and watched the screen while sipping her coffee. Jesse said,
This is good. I can access their emails and messages.
Mallory whispered, "Great, because it's going down quickly." Not wanting Elise to hear, Jesse looked up at her, and then over to Elise. Elise had heard the tail end of the conversation and put down the phone, saying, "I got her voicemail again." Noah pulled up a chair beside Jesse and said, "I left the SUV at the port. I didn't want to bring any attention to us. I'll go and get it later." Jesse replied, "That's fine. We have another car if we need to make a run." As they continued to work, the tension in the room grew thicker. Mallory could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her shoulders, and she knew that they had to act fast before it was too late. Suddenly, Jesse's computer beeped, indicating a new message had arrived. She clicked it open and read it aloud to the group. "The job is on for tomorrow. Meet at the usual spot at midnight." Mallory's heart raced. This was it. They had to move quickly and decisively. She stood up from the table and turned to face the others. "Okay, listen up," she said, her voice low and urgent. "We need to be ready for anything." Noah nodded in agreement, his face serious. Elise looked up at Mallory, determination shining in her eyes. "I'm ready," she said, "whatever it takes." Mallory nodded, a sense of respect and admiration for Elise swelling inside of her. Elise shook her head as she placed a call to Rachel.
Hey, Rachel. It's Elise. I just wanted to let you know that something happened tonight, and I'm a little worried. Can you please call me back as soon as you can? Thanks.
"Is everything okay?"
Yes, I think so. I just tried to call Rachel, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I'm hoping she'll call me back soon.
"I'm sure she will."
Rachel arrived in Zurich late at night, fuming with a boiling rage inside her. During her brief moments of rest, she thought back to Ian, whom she had regarded as a friend right up to his betrayal. If it hadn't been for the incessant ringing of the smoke detector and the barking of the neighbor's dog, she would have been burned to a crisp. She exited the train station and got into a cab, giving him the name of a hotel that she had stayed at in the past. With a deep breath and one last look towards the train station, she settled into the taxi cab. She peered out of the windows warily, looking around uneasily for any sign of anyone following her. She arrived at the hotel, bypassed the bellhop, and made her way to the front desk. She booked a suite and requested dinner to be sent up. The attendant gave her a key card and directed her to the elevators. She walked towards the elevator, then turned off as if going to the hotel bar off the lobby, pausing. She walked out the door on the other side, feeling cold and tired as she made her way on foot to the Storchin in Old Town. Seeing the lights of the up ahead, she walked under the canopy and made her way to the front desk attendant, where she booked a suite and asked for dinner to be sent up. He gave her a key card and pointed her in the direction of the elevators.
As she rode up in the elevator, she took a deep breath and tried to calm her nerves. As she entered the suite, closing the door with the dead bolt and turning to drop her backpack, she continued walking as she kicked off her shoes. She turned and walked down the hallway. The fatigue started to set in. As she pushed the door open, she entered the room, dropped her clothes, and made her way to the shower, emerging 5 minutes later with the hotel robe on. As the door buzzed, she looked through the peephole and opened the door for the attendant. She signed the bill as he placed the meal on the desk and thanked her. She nodded and proceeded to pour tea. With the tea in her hand, she moved over to plug her phone into the wall charger. She opened her music app and selected jazz, then turned the volume down and tucked into the eggs on the plate. Looking at the time, she yawned. It was 2 a.m., setting the alarm for 6 a.m. She slid under the covers and laid there contemplating the events of the last few hours as the music lulled her to sleep. Turning over, she looked at the clock. The time blinked 5:15 a.m. She reached for the buzzing phone, looking down at the caller ID. Helga. Helga's voice was solemn. Yes. Are you well? Well. She looks around in the dark, moving to sit up. Hold a second, she says. She picks up the phone and presses the button for room service. Can I have a carafe of coffee? She requests as she turned back to her phone. Rachel felt her stomach drop as the words came out of Helga's mouth. What do you mean the apartment has burned down? She asked. Helga sighed heavily, pausing for a moment before continuing. The situation is very tense here, and it could escalate at any moment. We need to act quickly if we're going to make sure no one else gets hurt. Rachel asked, do you know who is behind this? Helga replied, no, we are trying to trace your footsteps to see where it started. Rachel followed up, started.
It's possible that it is related to your family, rather than your work as an officer. We don't know who's responsible yet, but we are doing our best to investigate. It's important that we keep an eye out for any suspicious activity and make sure that the authorities are alerted if anything arises.
Thanks, she said dryly.
Rachel, I am here. Okay, she said, unable to bear the conversation for another moment. She was physically tired and emotionally exhausted. As the coffee arrived, she picked up her phone and called Elise. The cup was halfway to her mouth when Elise said, "I am being followed." It's possible that it is related to your family rather than your work as an officer. We don't know who's responsible yet, but we are doing our best to investigate. It's important that we keep an eye out for any suspicious activity and make sure that the authorities are alerted if anything arises.
Thanks, she said dryly.
Rachel, I am here. Okay, she said, unable to bear the conversation for another moment. She was physically tired and emotionally exhausted. As the coffee arrived, she picked up her phone and called Elise. The cup was halfway to her mouth when Elise said, "I am being followed."
The trees strained to the left under the force of the wind. I heard the rumble. While hardly soothing, it was a welcome. I stared out the window, watching the people rush to get away from the pelting rain. I looked around Neil's office as he finished up a call. He turned the volume back up on the business channel and said, "Look who we have here." I can't think of anyone who loves the spotlight more than this guy, but the more he talks, the more that share price moves up. Rachel looked back at the TV screen and saw the arrogant face of the CEO. Gerd Rachel, narcissist. As I looked over at the large monitor, shares of German pharma were ticking up steadily as the CEO spoke about the impact that the Phase 3 research would have on the company's market share. "I know, but who am I to question greatness?" he said. "It looks like we did well on that investment," he said, tapping his keyboard. "Yes. I think it was a smart move to invest some of my father's money into their stock. Can you tell me what the current market price is?" I said as I reached for the remote to turn the volume up. "Yes, definitely. That was some good info. I think we have doubled by now. Today it's at Holy to a teller and we got in around 54 per share. Doubled in 2 months." She paused as she recalled how nonchalant Ian had spoken about German pharma buying out the rights to the yet unpublished research that her father and Elise were working on. Helga's words. Echo. Trace back. There has been a lot of speculation that the research team of Doctors Jonathan Woods and Elise Shahi, based in the United States, will change the way cancer research and treatments are conducted. How do you see this impacting the products that German pharma sells?
Scoffin. No gloom here. We are a well-capitalized institution. Our debt is rated ALA by Standard & Poor's. And just last month, 5 leading investment banks said that we are the top investment choice for pension plans and other institutional investors. Neil asks Rachel as she zones out. Give me a minute, she mutters as she picks up her phone. Are you still at Jesse? Elise replies yes, handing the phone to Jesse. Elise mouths Rachel as Jesse takes the phone, then asks, what's the read?
We've already reached out to some of our contacts in Germany, but no one is talking. We think we may need to take a more direct approach if we want to get any answers. This is what we are working on now. Rachel, in frustration, said, I'm not looking for what you can prove. Jesse paused, then said, we believe the person who hired the outfit is from a German pharmaceutical company. It seems that they don't want the public to know about a possible cure for the illnesses.
It seems that they don't want the public to know about a possible cure for the illnesses Elise has been researching. Rachel asked, so they're trying to suppress her findings. Jesse replied, that's what it looks like.
It looks that way. Apparently, they had already placed a bet on the idea that she would fail in her research. But now the rumblings we've been hearing point to her potential success. So it looks like they're now trying to get leverage over her in order to make sure she tanks the research.
That leverage that was supposed to be me. Her voice trails off.
Rachel.
Please continue digging. I will get back to you soon. She then turned her head to Neil and asked, you say the stock has been on a steady rise? Neil replied, absolutely. Word is that some big investors have piled in recently, hoping to capitalize on the success of Phase 3 studies. Right now, everyone loves them.
Rachel asked, if we sell everything, how much cash can we access?
Neil answered, with the current market price, selling your father's shares would yield around 25 million. If you access the trust, you would have another 15 million. And if you access your mother's, that would provide another 18 million.
Rachel said, let's sell everything.
Neil warned, Rachel, this could pump tomorrow when the news is released. You will be leaving a lot of money on the table.
Yes, I want us to put a short on German pharma.
Neil spluttered. This is on everyone's conviction list. I mean everyone's. It's the darling from Wall Street to Main Street.
Rachel said through clenched teeth, yes, a short. Neil tapped a few keys, looked up and said, it's easy to borrow for the short. Do you want to just use your funds or all of the 68 million? She nodded. All of it. How long will it take?
Picking up his phone with speed, Neil replied, we can do something in 2 hours. How much exposure do you want?
Rachel replied, let's aim for maximum exposure.
Stood to look at her, then moved to the monitor and said, we can use options if you want to protect the downside.
Neil, stop. I have no idea what you mean by options. I simply want to sell everything in all the accounts and use those funds for a short. Do what you do best, she said, turning and pointing at the fine walnut furniture, the Eames chair and the luxury artwork on the wall.
What I do best is give advice, not run your portfolio into the ground. I can see where the stock dips 3-5% after the news release as investors take profits. But if we go all out, those gains will disappear if we're wrong.
Rachel looks over at him. He gazes steady as she says, balls to the wall.
Neil, eyes twinkled. Let's order lunch. I have to put some of the trade through now before the market closes. He teed up his screen and said, you can use my laptop, it's in my bag. He pointed to an old messenger bag sitting on the floor in the corner.
You still have this old beat-up bag, she said as she looked at the name on the front.
Yep, that's one of a kind, his head bent in concentration as he cleared the trades.
As they sat there with boxes of takeout, Rachel picked up the controls and turned back to the business channel. She is about to switch channels as one announcer read off the day's top events. Then the screen flashes breaking news.
The news anchors turned to the camera, their expressions a mix of confusion and awe.
We have some unbelievable news coming in. One of them said a medical research team working in the US have found a quick path to diagnose and prevent the growth of cancer.
The studio was silent as the announcement sunk in. The other anchor finally spoke up.
These are phenomenal findings, if I may say so, they added. It seems the view that this would be a game changer was correct.
Neil looked at her incredulously, then back to the screen where it showed German pharma stock dropping by 30%, trading halted flash across the top.
This is fucking unbelievable, he said.
Looking down at his Bloomberg screen and read out loud, investors had been expecting news of a breakthrough in their cancer treatments but were disappointed when none was forthcoming. The cause of the collapse was uncertain, but reports suggest that the market reacted badly to rumors that the expected announcement was delayed or worse, cancelled entirely.
Neil said, I think that closing out the short now is certainly our best option. With the stock falling by 30%, you have already made significant profits.
He was thankful that he had also sold his shares when she mentioned shorting. Some fund will view this as a buying opportunity and start to pump their book.
Buying opportunity? You have got to be fucking kidding me.
Neil, looking back to the Bloomberg terminal, he went back to reading out loud.
This has put a dampener on what should have been a buoyant day for investors. The company itself released a statement insisting that their research was still ongoing and showing promising results. It is believed that they may be trying to manage expectations following the stock plunge and prevent further losses. In response, analysts have cautioned investors to exercise caution when investing in German pharma shares until further information becomes available.
The market will remain volatile until more concrete information is released, so watch this space closely for more news about the future of German.
Rachel moved to get her phone. Let's see what happens when trading resumes. She points to the screen. Neil looked at her. She hadn't said why she had shown up out of the blue looking frantic. As he looked at her now, he decided that this was not the time to ask. He looked down at his keyboard and brought up the company's financials, looking at the 10K information to see if there was something he had missed. Hello? Congratulations. You are the wonder kid of cancer research. Team effort, she said with a smile. You should be proud. Where are you? I'm still at Jesse's. Okay, can you put her on the phone?
Rachel, we are still?
I know. Just send me what you have about who was following. All of it. We are still working on the proof right now. It's conjecture.
Yes, all of it.
All of it, whiles Helga as she forwards the files from Jesse. I'm sending you the files.
I got it.
Are you sure this is true?
It's as good of a lead as we have at this moment.
What do you want to happen? This will wipe them out.
Gerhard has to be fired. He can't be the CEO of a healthcare company anymore.
Rachel, she scoffs. It's not healthcare. It's pharma. They should be saving lives. All of it.
Call me when it's done. Neil looks up at the stern note in her voice. We wait, she says as he nods.
Well, Bob, this is certainly bad news, says Amy Lee as she points to the flashing breaking news. Bob, Amy, just last week, we had the CEO of German Pharma here in the studio, and now Gerhard has been arrested, points to a video of him being carried away by the police. Amy, The market will need to wrap their head around this. She looks at the screen where the stock falls another 20%.
You are right, Amy. This will be a tough day for German pharma investors. We had several biotech analysts touting that an investment in this company leadership team was a safe bet.
I think that closing out the short now is certainly our best option. He looked down at the spreadsheet on his laptop. The option portfolio had increased 20-fold. Rachel? He looked at the firm set of her jaw as she watched the CEO being taken into custody.
When it opens, close out 10% of the short every hour to make it look random. Neil, staring at his screens. Got it. Let's buy up some of the senior debt, and if I don't make it back in time, buy 20% of the listed shares when the market opens. Open. Yes, I should be back by noon. Looks like I have a breakfast meeting.
Breakfast? How can you think about food now?
Rachel exited the building, using her hands to shield her eyes from the bright sun. She moved closer to the limestone-clad skyscraper and past the high-end boutiques lining the street. As she was about to turn left, she saw a blue leather jacket in the window. She thought about her damaged jacket in Berlin and went inside the store. The security guard welcomed her as he opened the door. Rachel walked over to the jacket, her fingers touching the leather. The associate walked up and said, "Incredible soft, isn't it? We have your size." Rachel said, "It is nice," and looked around, noticing a navy blue wool suit draped across a chair. The associate saw her looking at the suit and asked, "Do you want to try it on? I have blue, black, and gray." She quickly took off her coat and put the jacket on, looking at the mirror and noticing how well it fit. "I will take the suit," she said, "but I am running to a meeting. Can you deliver the items to my hotel?" He nodded and said, "Of course." She paid and provided the address for her hotel where she wanted her clothing to be delivered. "I will wear this jacket now," she added, not taking it off. "Sure," he smiled. "It's a great fit." With this sort of orb on a straight into video, and hope she was knowing in the same one else to take a brand. Noon like Berlin 21 a long time, starting, colleging, new wording, triply over the front Slovak for inig, which you read to King for this miles per age, articulating to up the load. Every time we have some forgot of failure, degrading red of informed hair and temptation, and it is saving 2-in-1 smells of school dream mystics. This was saying tills in duration in soft or this muddy and mace weak and square spakes. I was camp real so far from orientation, swank and met as courses describes, you well storaging all the lies. For aftens flowing at Lamsers, she in a blown out of the smile and came to be enlaced. Kutigadi at large imagine the fire from 4 my like, she said heavily patterly. I'm grubbing at what her hands try the knock at the Syrian from levers. Weston Tinans, Gerbestration on from Revation, low Cabinowans of Fertin were favorites. It was a regression of how to even tell us. What is to be of Twiliclicity is Stein later be calling not a raking them for combiners. And there was toward him a figurelling combiners which was in we old one again. A Carl Kelly him a self-searching their monitors, quarter lay friskedly. Canody lock me. How would I happen get with a sport or two, Widian? No one sort of no one tearing and the spitting once in our tang. 2-in-1 fies, no cornice or skunkamized too. Panud, get we help the supper any 5th kings ever need to find middle lollies bumper ground. It was in to afforded to enough the sigil bearing by the man before listening time out there. Tiliam strayed with me when the month stricken forward of the lies and keeps his spade with an traces confevicious fits. Via unscrubbed within wasting was tavis become of this, but having body patch or return fit the even mining service well surround.
Rachel took a deep breath and walked into the conference room with her head held high. All eyes were on her as she confidently took her seat at the table. Rachel smiled and nodded to the Chancellor. "Chancellor," Rachel said in greeting. "Chancellor." "Rachel, I thought you would be in New York. It must be an exciting week for your father and his research team, finding a way to stop the growth of cancer." Yes, Chancellor. It's a great opportunity for my father and his team to be working with the top experts in New York on this research. The news this morning was abysmal. Now we have to find a group willing to take on German Pharma. Gerhard has gone off the deep end. Rachel replied, Chancellor, I understand the urgency of the situation. That's why I have a proposal that I believe can help us. I know a team that can take over and run it as a healthcare company. Are you willing to lend your support to a US group? With raised eyebrows, US. This is a German institution. The people will be fine. German Pharma's recent actions have been very anti. She pauses.
Okay, Rachel.
If you are involved, I will support it.
Thank you.
She shook hands and walks out of the room as she made her way back to Neil's office. You're all dressed up. New jacket. Yes. Off the shelf, but not bad. Now, where were we?
Everyone has been dumping. We now have 50% of the senior debt.
Who has the other 50%?
Deutschland.
Okay, let's leave it at that. Neil looks over at the other screen. He points and says, I have an algorithm set up to buy shares. Where are we on that? Neil looks at the screen. We have 20% of the listed, which we picked up at the open. Have you closed out the short? Only on the option side. Let's close out all of the shorts now. Neil punches a few keys, looks up to the screen and says, done. As Rachel leans back in her chair, a look of satisfaction on her face, Neil looks up at her with a mixture of respect and awe. You're amazing, Rachel. You really know how to handle yourself in a tough situation. Rachel smiles. Really, it's not the first time I've had to save the day. Neil nods in understanding. I can imagine, but this is different. This is big. We're talking about the future of a whole industry. Rachel's expression turns serious. I know, and we have to make sure we do it right. We can't afford to make any mistakes.
Rachel looked at the monitor and said, no impact on prices. Neil replied, all the institutions are dumping. The algo tracks sentiment and right now everyone is in shock. Rachel said, let's do another 10% buy. Neil shouted, wow, that last buy was 5% lower than the one before. Rachel looked at him and said, another 10%. Neil replied, we are now at 50%. Rachel asked, has the price moved up? Neil replied, no. Rachel asked, who are the major holders? Neil spat off, D. Shaw Renaissance. Rachel said, the quantitative shops don't care about the underlying, it seems. Just dumping. I only need 51%. Neil asked, do you want control? Rachel replied, yes, let's go another 10%. That will take me to 60%. Breaking news, German authorities have filed charges. Inspector speaking conspiracy to murder. Announcer that carries a hefty prison sentence. Shows the stock price diving again. It's tanking again. Rachel, at these prices, the investment pays for itself in 3 years. What are you saying? Declares, forget about control. There is no buyer. Let's just take the whole thing. Have you tallied up? She queried. Neil, pointing to the monitor on the right, says, wow. When you're angry, you're amazing. He points at the price where the shares are trading now. It won't make a dent. Okay, do it, but just take it at the bid. She gets up, stretches, and looks around. I'm thinking of catching the red-eye to New York. Why don't you come with me? Neil looks around the office and down at the clothes that he has been wearing for 2 days. I should try to spend a day with the family, he responds with a wry grin. You know we're going to need a good law firm in Germany. Okay, let me get on that as she picks up the phone and calls her dad. Are you fine? Jonathan asks. Elise said something happened? Rachel replies, Dad, I am good. It's settled, she says. Good, good, Jonathan responds. And the ceremony? I will be there, not to worry, Rachel assures him. Elise has been worried, he says softly. Rachel lets out a breath. I am taking the red eye, so I will be there in time for lunch. That's great, Jonathan comments. Dad, what is the name of a law firm that is good with German corporate finance? Frank should have a contact. Let me send you his cell phone number. Rachel looks down at the contact and then hangs up with her dad and dials. Frank Brown. Frank, this is Rachel, Jonathan's daughter. Great news about your dad's research team. Yes, he's happy. Hey Frank, can you come to Zurich? Sure. I'm sending you the contact for Neil.
I'm sending you the contact for Neil. She looks at Neil, who is typing furiously on his laptop, poring over spreadsheets and financial reports. As he nods, I have a suite at Afai. You can work from there, but Neil will fill you in when you arrive. I'm also sending you the details additionally. You'll need an assistant who is excellent at German corporate finance.
Sure. I have someone on my team. Let me make arrangements, and I can let you know when I get in.
I am here now, but I'm leaving on the red eye, so I can make the ceremony looking down at her calendar. I can be back perhaps by Wednesday. But Neil has all the information that you can start working on.
Okay, speak soon. Rachel hangs up and says to Neil, Frank works at the law firm that handles my father's businesses.
Leave it with me. I'll ensure that things go smoothly.
Let's just do a Swiss, German Sakov. Put the debt in one and the equity in the other, and have him put you as the manager.
Manager? You want me involved long-term?
Yes. If I run, I might be able to grab an earlier flight.
Checks the flight schedule. Do you want me to drop you off at the airport?
Shakes her head as she packs up her desk.
Stay here and tie up all the loose ends. They high-five as she walks out of the office. I will see you next week. I will see you next week. Rekenmem skeens over Tumen boing country to dream self. I'm sending you the contact for Neil. She looks at Neil, who is typing furiously on his laptop, poring over spreadsheets and financial reports. As he nods, I have a suite at Prefire. You can work from there, but Neil will fill you in when you arrive. I'm also sending you the details additionally. You'll need an assistant who is excellent at German corporate finance.
Sure. I have someone on my team. Let me make arrangements, and I can let you know when I get in.
I am here now, but I'm leaving on the red eye, so I can make the ceremony looking down at her calendar. I can be back perhaps by Wednesday. But Neil has all the information that you can start working on.
Okay, speak soon. Rachel hangs up and says to Neil, Frank works at the law firm that handles my father's businesses.
Leave it with me. I'll ensure that things go smoothly.
Let's just do a Swiss, German Sakov. Put the debt in one and the equity in the other, and have him put you as the manager.
Manager? You want me involved long-term?
As she was about to walk out of the office, a black BMW pulled up. She froze as the driver stepped out. It was one of the men that she had encountered in Berlin. Without hesitation, she pulled out her phone and snapped a picture. She grimaced and quickly turned back towards the elevator, her heart pounding in her chest.
She immediately sent the picture to Helga, her contact in Germany, with a message that read, "One of yours?" Helga replied, "No, but it belongs to the outfit that Gerhard had been using to put a hit on you." "Do they know that it's over?" Rachel said, returning to the elevator and going back into the office. "Radicals rarely do," Helga responded. "I was trying to get on the red-eye flight," Rachel added. "Not today. Get to a safe place and I will send some help." Neil looked up in surprise as Rachel walked into the office. "Pack it up," she commanded, confused. Neil quickly complied as he hurriedly began to gather his things. He pressed a button by the wall. The screen disappeared and glossy pictures of models took its place. Rachel grabbed her briefcase and swiftly made her way to the door. Neil followed her out of the office and down the hall. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. As he watched her walk towards the exit, her eyes darted from side to side as if she were searching for something. Panic began to rise in Neil's chest as he realized what Rachel was up against. She rushed across the street, deciding to go down the stretch with the boutiques. As her gaze wandered up to the For Lease sign, she missed the step, stumbled, and tripped. Suddenly, she was hands down on the pavement, sliding on her knees in shock. She looked up at Neil, stunned. There was a burning sensation in her knee. She blinked and murmured, "I'm all right," wincing as she got up. As they stepped out of the building, Rachel suddenly grabbed Neil's arm and pulled him into an alleyway. "What the hell?" he exclaimed, but Rachel shushed him and pointed to a black SUV parked across the street. "That's them," she whispered. "We need to move now." They darted down the alleyway and emerged onto a busy street. Rachel scanned the crowd, looking for anyone who might be following them, while Neil kept watch behind them. Suddenly, a man in a black hoodie appeared out of nowhere and lunged at Rachel with a knife. She sidestepped him and pulled out a gun from her purse, firing a shot into the air. The man ran off, disappearing into the crowd. Rachel quickly holstered her gun and turned to Neil. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Neil nodded, his eyes wide with shock.
Laurel introduced herself and shared her story. She had recently been diagnosed with cancer and was overwhelmed with gratitude for the work that the team was doing to help people in her situation. "I feel hopeful after this weekend," she said to Elise. Elise smiled warmly at Laurel as she spoke. "We are working to make a difference," she said, trying to offer encouragement. She then took out a card and said, "Take my card and please visit if I can be of service." As Elise and Mallory made their way through the crowded room, they passed by a group of wealthy donors sipping champagne and discussing their latest investments. Mallory couldn't help but feel a sense of disgust at their pretentiousness and the stark contrast between their lavish lifestyle and the struggles of the patients at the hospital. Her eyes sweeping the room, she noticed a blonde man staring at them intently. Elise turned to her, sensing her unease. "What's wrong?" she asked as she took in the man across from the bar, concern etched on her face. Mallory leaned in and whispered, "We need to leave now."
Deutsche Bank is falling again, Neil said, looking down at his phone and speaking in a worried tone. Word on the street is that the hedge funds are beating them up on their investment in German pharma. Everyone in the room fell silent. There's a rumor that they're going to miss their earnings projections because of the value of German pharma. Frank said in a hushed tone, "The recent price of the stock has placed pressure on their holdings. Also, a write-down of this magnitude has put pressure on the stock price." Rachel swore under her breath. For fuck's sake, who are these hedge funds? The room was silent as everyone waited for an answer. "The usual suspects," says Neil, "D. Shaw, Renaissance." Rachel's voice reverberated as she asked, "Are they still holding the senior note on German pharma?" The room was quiet as everyone awaited the answer. "Yes." Neil nodded solemnly. "They tried to unload a block but could not find buyers. It's at 40 cents on the dollar," he added, a chill running through the room. Eyes blazing with determination, Rachel's voice was stern and firm as she declared, "Take it." Everyone in the room fell silent. Neil's eyes were wide as he asked, "What do you want to do about D. Shaw, Renaissance?" Rachel replied, "Nothing.
Let them sweat it out. Also, can you set up a bot to make selective buys on Deutsche Bank? Nothing outlandish, just pick up blocks when it looks like the funds are dumping. Neil joked. Okay, always good to be a board member of a bank. Rachel replied, you have got to be kidding. Just stay under 1%. We're going to be busy with fixing the mothership.
Laurel introduced herself and shared her story. She had recently been diagnosed with cancer and was overwhelmed with gratitude for the work that the team was doing to help people in her situation. I feel hopeful after this weekend, she said to Elise. Elise smiled warmly at Laurel. As she spoke, we are working to make a difference, she said, trying to offer encouragement. She then took out a card and said, take my card and please visit if I can be of service. As Elise and Mallory made their way through the crowded room, they passed by a group of wealthy donors sipping champagne and discussing their latest investments. Mallory couldn't help but feel a sense of disgust at their pretentiousness and the stark
Laurel introduced herself and shared her story. She had recently been diagnosed with cancer and was overwhelmed with gratitude for the work that the team was doing to help people in her situation. I feel hopeful after this weekend, she said to Elise. Elise smiled warmly at Laurel, offering her a hug and a few comforting words of encouragement. She then took out a card and said, we are working as fast as we can, and you should feel hopeful. Here is my card. Please visit if I can be of service. As Elise and Mallory made their way through the crowded room, they passed by a group of wealthy donors sipping champagne and discussing their latest investments. Mallory couldn't help but feel a sense of disgust at their pretentiousness and the stark contrast between their lavish lifestyle and the struggles of the patients at the hospital. As they approached another group of guests, Mallory noticed a man staring at them intently. Elise turned to her, sensing her unease. What's wrong? She asked, concern etched on her face. Mallory leaned in and whispered, we need to leave, now. Deutsche Bank is falling again, Neil said, looking down at his phone and speaking in a worried tone. Word on the street is that the hedge funds are beating them up on their investment in German pharma. Everyone in the room fell silent. There's a rumor that they're going to miss their earnings projections because of the value of German pharma, Frank said in a hushed tone. If German pharma goes under, it would put serious pressure on the stock price. Rachel swore under her breath. For fuck's sake, who are these hedge funds? The room was silent as everyone waited for an answer. Renaissance and Soros, Neil said. Rachel's voice reverberated as she asked, are they still holding the senior note on German pharma? The room was quiet as everyone awaited the answer. Yes. Neil nodded solemnly, confirming that the Deutsche Bank was still holding the senior note on German pharma. It's at 40 cents on the dollar, he added, a chill running through the room. Eyes blazing with determination, Rachel's voice was stern and firm as she declared, take it. Everyone in the room fell silent. Neil's eyes were wide as he asked, what do you want to do about Renaissance and Soros? Rachel replied, nothing, let them sweat it out. Also, can you set up a bot to make selective buys on Deutsche Bank? Nothing outlandish, just pick up blocks when it looks like the funds are dumping. Joked. Okay, always good to be a board member of a bank. Rachel replied, blah blah, stay under 1.0%, we are going to be busy with fixing the mothership.
Rachel stood up and looked the lit attorney for German pharma directly in the eye. She calmly said, you can either work with us or be on your way, as she pointed towards the door. The lit attorney for German pharma looked between Frank and Rachel with a heavy atmosphere in the room. Suddenly, he said, we could work together if you are willing, his gaze sifting to Rachel in a conciliatory tone. Neil cleared his throat, and the room grew silent.
He looked around the room and said, "We need to see the quarterly projections to get an accurate picture of what we're dealing with here." The lead attorney for German Pharma nodded slowly and rose from his chair. He said, "I will get the CFO," and the entire room held their breath in anticipation. Rachel's eyes pierced the lead attorney as she said, "We also need a block of rooms. Should we wait for the Chancellor's announcement of the ownership change before you redecorate?" The CFO said as she entered the room. "Lift up the file with the stamp and said, 'This is the notice.'" She paused and glanced around the room, her eyes lingering on each of them in turn. Frank leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the CFO. "And what does the notice say?" he asked, his voice steady and controlled. The CFO took a deep breath and began to read from the document in her hand. "Effective immediately, ownership of German Pharma has been transferred to the newly formed entity, created by the acquisition of all shares in senior debt by the group led by Rach Woods and Neil Jardine," she said, her voice echoing through the silent room. The lead attorney for German Pharma stared at the paper in disbelief. "This is outrageous," he exclaimed, his voice rising with anger. "We will fight this in court." Rachel stood up again, her eyes flashing with determination. "You can try," she said, "but we have the law on our side."
The news spread like wildfire, and the newscaster announced Reconnecting German Pharma has been taken private in an unprecedented transaction. The newscaster spoke in hushed tones as he reported that Rachel Woods had purchased German Pharma for an undisclosed amount. The deal, announced today, states that the once prestigious institution will be run by American Rachel Woods and Swiss investor Neil Jardine. Rachel Woods, the daughter of Jonathan Woods, has acquired German Pharma. This is quite a surprise, as no one would have expected that the Germans would sell the golden egg to an outsider. The newscaster's voice filled the room as he reported that the stock had dropped by 80% since Gerhard, the CEO, had been arrested. He commented that no one had wanted to hold on to their shares during such a tumultuous time. The newscaster nodded solemnly as he concluded his report, saying that it looked like the worst was finally behind them. Helga, the German intelligence officer, spoke to Rachel in a serious tone. "We have picked up all the radicals, and you should take some security measures for your own safety. It should be safe for you to travel freely now. We got a break from the clone phone data dump. They hacked into the suspects' computers and accessed their emails, searching for any clues that might lead to their whereabouts." "How did you get your hands on that so quickly?" Rachel leaned forward and said, "Come closer, let me tell you." Helga smirked, saying, "I know that line. Whatever, keep it to yourself." Rachel thanked her, and then Helga continued, "It would also look good for you to own a residence in Germany." Rachel shook her head and exclaimed, "I'm not moving here." Helga replied, "Look at this as a challenge." Rachel asked, "A challenge?" Helga replied, "Come on, you are a trained engineer with an MBA who has worked in these parts for years." Rachel's voice wavered as she recalled, "I was almost burned to a crisp." The horror of the situation hung thick in the air as they thought about what had happened. Helga suggested, "It would be a good idea to talk to someone you know, to clear your mind. So think of it as a mission. You are beautiful, smart, and fluent in German and French." Helga hadn't realized that you felt that way. "That..." She flushed as she stammered. "No, what I mean is you have all the qualities of the kind of leader who can turn this around." She ticked off her fingers. "Incredibly confident, never second-guessing decisions, and works well under pressure. Come on, don't you see? You're the perfect example of corporate diplomacy. Sounds like you want to write my resume. Come on, you're up for the challenge." Helga's voice was kind as she suggested, "It might be a good idea to talk to someone, to clear your mind." Rachel scoffed and said, "See a shrink over my dead body." Her words hung heavy in the room as everyone realized this was not a joking matter. Helga nodded firmly and said, "Yes, you should at least meet with a psychologist." Rachel took a deep breath and said, "Okay, we're almost wrapped up here. Let me see what happens when I go back to New York." Helga smirked, her voice filled with a steely confidence. "German Pharma has a G550 corporate jet," she said. Rachel rose to her feet and said, "Well then, I call it a night." Rachel stepped onto the corporate jet and took a deep breath of the crisp air, accompanied by 2 security guards hired to ensure her safety during the trip. She took her seat and buckled in, her palms sweating with anticipation. The engines roared and the plane began to taxi down the runway. As it took off, Rachel looked out the window at the beautiful view below. She could see the city and the vast expanse of the ocean, and for a moment, she felt like she was on top of the world. After a few hours, the plane began its descent into New York. She saw the city below and felt a sense of calm in returning safely. Rachel could feel her heart racing with anticipation at seeing Elise as she walked off the plane. Rachel walked into the hospital, her heart racing with anticipation. She made her way through the corridors until she arrived at Elise's office. Rachel quietly opened the door and stepped inside. Elise turned around, her face lighting up in surprise. "Rachel, what are you doing here?" she exclaimed. Rachel smiled and said, "I wanted to surprise you. I've missed you." She walked over and embraced Elise. Elise smiled and said, "This is the best surprise ever. Thank you." Rachel and Elise stood close, their faces inches apart. Rachel slowly leaned in and kissed Elise passionately, feeling the warmth of Elise's lips and the electricity that seemed to spark between them. The kiss was interrupted when Rachel heard a voice behind her say, "I heard you were here." Rachel pulled away from Elise and hugged her dad. She looked up at him and smirked, saying, "Corporate jet." Her dad laughed and said, "I heard about it from Frank. See, I told you that you should have gone to medical school, but no, you wanted an MBA." Rachel laughed and said the MBA paid for the large pharmaceutical company. Jonathan said, "Call your mom, she's worried sick about you." Rachel sighed and nodded. Looking at Elise, she said, "How about we come over for dinner tonight?" Elise was surprised but delighted at the idea. She said, "That sounds wonderful."
They went to a quiet and secluded hotel in the countryside. They sat by a babbling stream, with the dappled sunlight playing on their skin. As they shared stories, they grew closer, enjoying each other's company and the beauty of the landscape around them. As night fell, they built a small fire and opened the balcony doors. Together, they looked up and admired the stars, shining brightly in the night sky. They shared a romantic kiss and finally fell asleep, wrapped in each other's arms. In the morning, they awoke to birds chirping and enjoyed a simple breakfast on the balcony. Afterwards, they set off on a leisurely walk through the fields, stopping to admire the beauty of the countryside and the vivid colors of the wildflowers. It is recommended that I put down some roots in Germany. Perhaps get a residence, she begins hesitantly, while the transition is underway. How will we see each other? You there and me here. She thought of the future they had dreamt of together, and wondered if it would still be possible if they were in 2 different countries. I am working to get things settled. Yes, we do have some furnished units that would be suitable for an expat. Would you like to come and take a look at them? Is it available online? Yes, I will send you a link with a real interior view. I'm sure that they are terrific, but I need a warm place. Yes, we can help you find furniture and artwork that will really make the space feel like home. We also have a list of recommended interior designers who can help you make the space more personalized. Do you have homes with a gate? Yes, but those are not rentals. That's fine. Could you make a list and I'll be in your office in an hour? Sure. See you then. Rachel arrived at the real estate office, where she was greeted by the agent. After a brief introduction, the two set off to view the house. When they arrived, Rachel was immediately impressed with the large iron gate that opened up to the property. As the agent opened the door, she said it was rather unique in its design. The owners had vacationed around the Maldives Islands, so no expense was spared to create the full maximalist look. Maximalist? Rachel said, raising an eyebrow as she took in the multitude of bold colors in the living room. The real estate agent said, all the furniture comes with the house. As they walked through the house, Rachel was reminded of her neighbor Dietrich's home in Greenwich. She took in the brightly painted walls as she walked into the kitchen, seeing the modern sink with its view to the garden.
She smiled at the stainless steel appliances, opened the door of the fridge, and was impressed to see the electricity still on. How long has it been vacant? Rachel asked the real estate agent as she turned to take the rear stairs to the second floor. The home has not been occupied for some time, the real estate agent replied, but the owners have a caretaker who comes once a week to clean. Rachel was amazed at the stately home and surprised that it had not been snatched up after exploring the house. Rachel knew that this was the one. She thanked the agent and made the decision to purchase the house. Rachel dialed Helga's number, her heart racing with excitement. When Helga answered, Rachel couldn't help but smile. Helga, I have wonderful news, she said. I've bought a house. Helga gasped in surprise. That's amazing. Congratulations, she said. I have a list of housekeepers who have been vetted and are ready to start work, she said, looking down at the list. Miriam is the best. Rachel replied, Great. Can you send her my contact information if she can help me with the house? That would be great. She then asked, What about assistants? I need one in my office. Helga replied that she had a few contacts who could help Rachel find the perfect assistant for the job. Rachel thanked her and hung up, relieved that she had someone to help her with the transition into her new home. Rachel had stepped into a world she had never imagined. Her days were spent in strategy sessions and her nights at social events. She was now the chairman and CEO of a major healthcare company. As she settled into her new role, she quickly realized that it was a lot different than anything she had ever done before. She had to juggle endless meetings and conference calls as the public face of a powerful business, combined with the ongoing friction boiling just below the surface within the executive team. She knew that one of the employees was egging on the team, creating strife and doubt. Last week, she had to squash a rumor that she was planning to sell the company in pieces to the highest bidder. Rachel, I have been looking into our options, and I'm sure I can move the company to the US. The division heads gasped in surprise, but that would require a lot of reorganization and restructuring. One of them said. Rachel nodded in understanding. I understand the challenges, but if we want to survive, this is our best option. We can take advantage of all the economic and business opportunities that come with being based in the US, she said. She then spent the next 2 hours outlining her plan for the company and how they would make it through the difficult time. As she finished speaking, they all nodded in agreement. They were confident in Rachel's lead.
She soon found that being a leader was far more complex than she had expected. After interviewing several prospects, she had settled on one, a woman named Isabel, who seemed to have the perfect combination of intelligence and experience. Rachel was confident that Isabel could help her with the demands on her time. She had to learn to prioritize tasks and delegate responsibilities, as she could not be at every meeting and conference. One of the biggest challenges Rachel faced was the time difference between her and Elise. While they would try to speak at least once a day, it became overwhelming, and soon they were playing phone tag. Daily calls became every 2 days, and only with trying very hard could they make time to speak freely. The spontaneity had gone, and everything was taking its toll. Rachel opened the door to find her mother, Catherine, standing in the doorway. Rachel felt a wave of warmth wash over her as they embraced. She hadn't seen her mother in weeks, and it was so good to see her again. Rachel could hardly believe how much she had missed her mom, who meant so much to her. Catherine stepped into the house and looked around with a satisfied smile. I had to see it with my own eyes. This is magnificent, the blues and gold accents. Wow, if only your grandmother could see this now, she said. Rachel stood next to her mother and looked around. It is quite peaceful, she said. Come and meet Miriam. Helga found her for me. Elise and Jesse had agreed to meet for lunch. The friends had grown closer together after the incident a few months before when Elise had been followed, and Jesse had stepped in to help sew. Elise said, "What's new with you?" Jesse lowered her gaze and smiled. "Noah and I are dating. We have a lot of fun and I like spending time with him." Elise looked up, smiling, and her eyes lit up. "Really? That sounds great." Jesse nodded and blushed. "I think so too." She paused and then said, "What about you? How is Rachel?" Elise sighed as she said, "It's pure hell with this phone tag. She's working like a dog, and with my schedule plus the time difference, let's just say, ouch." Jesse nodded sympathetically and reached out to take her hand. "It's okay," she said. "I'm sure Rachel will call you back soon." Elise sent Rachel a text message, letting her know that she would be in London for 3 days and asking her to call her when she had a chance. She then put her phone away and looked up at Jesse. Elise smiled and squeezed her hand. "Thanks." Elise smiled, feeling a little calmer. "Thanks." She looked around the cafe and noticed the time. "Oh, we should probably get going." She said, "I need to finish up in the lab so that I can have next week free when I'm in London." Jesse said, "Elise, why don't you consider?"
Jesse said, "Elise, why don't you consider working from Germany?" Elise replied, "I would have to leave the hospital." Jesse said, "Yes, but you should still be able to do your research from Berlin." Elise was a little disappointed when she got Rachel's assistant on the phone instead. "Hi, this is Elise. I was trying to reach Rachel. Is she available?" The assistant apologized. "I'm sorry, Rachel isn't available right now. Can I take a message?" Elise sighed. "Sure, could you please tell her that I called and that I'd like to talk to her as soon as possible?" Rachel had just returned to her office. She sat down and looked out the window as her assistant Isabel walked in. The sun was setting, casting a warm orange light over the city skyline. Although tired, she was starting to feel content. They had just wrapped up the quarter, and after grueling hours-long meetings with the division head, she had signed off on the financial report. She placed the report on her desk and stared out of the window. She had been working non-stop for weeks, and the pressure was beginning to take its toll. She watched as the sun sank behind the horizon, and the city lights flickered to life. She sighed and leaned back in her chair. She needed a break, but there was no time for one. Isabel, her assistant, said, "Elise called," and suddenly her phone buzzed. She picked it up and it was a text from Elise telling her that she was in London for the next few days. Rachel smiled, feeling a little bit of relief. Maybe a few days in another city would do her some good. On the last day of the conference, Rachel took the jet to London. She had been excited to get away from the hustle and bustle of the city and to spend some time with Elise. She was full of anticipation for the days ahead. When she finally arrived at the hotel, she was relieved to see Elise waiting for her. They hugged tightly, and Rachel felt a wave of warmth wash over her. For the next few days, they explored the city together. They strolled along the river, admiring the architecture, visiting museums and art galleries, and having long conversations over cups of tea. Rachel took a deep breath and said, "I want you to come to Berlin with me." Elise nodded. Rachel and Elise arrived at the house, both feeling a wave of relief as they stepped inside. As Elise looked around, she said, "This is warmer than the pictures you had sent." Rachel nodded, saying, "Yes, Miriam modified a few elements." She pointed to the wall with the painting and the decor. "Yes, I can see it," said Elise. "Still an incredible find. Why did they sell?" Vesper, the real estate agent, said it had been available for almost a year, as the family had moved to Australia for work. Elise murmured that it had really been 1 year. Dit schijmen de works, has face. Ivrang visigli, from the passive afri. The passiver the face to the cove memorenzadel, for a aching hand, the Renovating frowned and wrecked the question. Silence, the real estate agent, said it had been available for almost a year, as the family had moved to Australia for work. Elise murmured that it had really...
Elise murmured that it had really been 1 year as she took off her shoes. Rachel led Elise into the living room and lit a few candles, their soft light filling the room with a warm glow. "Let's sit for a minute. We can do the tour later," Rachel said. Rachel and Elise sunk into the comfortable couch, and Rachel put on some soft music. They cuddled up close, and Rachel rested her head on Elise's shoulder. As they sat there, Rachel felt a deep sense of contentment wash over her. She had never felt so at peace before. Elise looked up at Rachel and smiled. "This is perfect," she said. Rachel smiled back and nodded. "It is." Finally, Rachel stood up and stretched. "Let's get some dinner," she said. Elise smiled and nodded. "I'm starving." "But I don't want to go out," Rachel thought. She smiled. "Me neither. But I am rarely here, so there is no food. We have to go out." "Don't worry. There is a restaurant not far from here with really delicious food." As they entered the restaurant, they were immediately welcomed by the warm smell of freshly cooked food and a friendly host. They were shown to their seats and given menus to peruse. Rachel said, "I've had the potato pancakes. They make it the traditional way with grated potatoes, eggs, and flour before frying in butter. If you're in the mood for meat, the schnitzel is a traditional German dish of breaded and fried pork which is served with a side of potatoes." Elise replied, "How about we get a little of everything and share?" Once they had placed their orders, they sat back and enjoyed the atmosphere. The restaurant was filled with people chatting and laughing, and the sound of clinking glasses and cutlery in the background. Their food arrived shortly after, and they both took a bite. They spent the rest of the evening talking and laughing and enjoying each other's company. Rachel and Elise were walking along the banks of the Rhine River when they suddenly stopped. Rachel turned to Elise and smiled. "Will you marry me?" she said. Elise took Rachel's hand and pulled her closer. "Yes," she said, before leaning in for a passionate kiss. Elise smiled. "You show all the weight of the wearing small folking crimes of Reconnecting, which held me in the Territ House Kentucky. He had started to leak away a streaks to get with hair cremers in 60. So prosit. There's Bush and America. Race, racial tart, machi, still rare shades, wearing the reins, and the lady."
Walking into the ballroom, I held on to Rachel, as the reporter for the Financial Times made a beeline for her. "Don't look now," I whispered, "but you are about to have your picture taken." Rachel pointed to the left and said, "Let's go in that direction." We waked past the waiters serving champagne and into the crowd of people mingling, as Rachel beelined for the crowd surrounding the Chancellor. Spotting us moving towards her, the Chancellor held up her hand. A warm smile stretched across her face as she pointed to us and said, "Look who we have here." The server stops, and I moved my hand to take 2 glasses of champagne for Rachel and myself as I greeted the Chancellor. "What a fantastic turnout this is. I heard that you had a great quarter at German Pharma." "Yes. The word on the grapevine is that you are about to marry Elise Shahi." She winks at Elise. "How are you settling in, Elise?" she asks as she beckons to a tall man with wire-rimmed glasses. Rachel turned to Elise and said, "This is the president of the university." He smiled warmly at them and addressed Elise. "If you would like to visit the campus, I'm sure the students would benefit from meeting with you. Perhaps you could be a guest lecturer for one of our classes." Elise was taken aback by the offer, but she nodded in agreement. Rachel smiled, proud of Elise for being offered such an opportunity. "That sounds wonderful," the Chancellor commented. "I'm sure the students here would be thrilled to meet you and hear firsthand about your groundbreaking research." The university president nodded in agreement and thanked them both for considering the offer. He then bid them farewell and walked away, leaving them to continue their conversation. Elise arrived at the restaurant to meet with her uncle, finding him already seated at a table. She smiled warmly and took the seat across from him, the two of them exchanging pleasantries as they waited for their food to arrive. "So, you're on sabbatical from the hospital?" her uncle asked her. Elise nodded, her face spreading into a smile. "Yes, I am. It's been a wonderful break, and I've been taking the time to explore other interests." "That's great," her uncle said. "What have you been up to?" Elise told him about her recent invitation to be a guest lecturer at the university, and her uncle's eyes lit up with surprise and delight. "That's fantastic. I'm so proud of you, Elise. You've always been so passionate about your research, and now you have the opportunity to share your knowledge with others." Elise smiled, pleased with her uncle's response.
At first, it went well. The students seemed engaged, nodding along as Elise spoke, and asking thoughtful questions. However, one student in the back of the room then began to heckle her, questioning her every statement and making rude comments. Elise felt her face flush with embarrassment, but she kept her composure and continued to speak. "Rachel, it's Helga. We have been monitoring Elise's lecture series, and I have some news to share with you." Rachel felt her stomach drop. "What is it?" The university president called and said that there was a heckler at Elise's lecture. After the events of last summer, they don't want any radicalized groups to gain a foothold, so they have asked us to provide surveillance. Rachel nervously tapped her fingers on the desk as she dialed the number for Noah, the group that had provided security for Elise's. Finally, she heard a voice on the other line. "Hello, this is Noah." Elise sighed as she hung up the phone, feeling drained after her conversation with Jesse. She had told her about the heckler and the fear she felt when she realized someone was targeting. Her Jesse was quick to reassure her, telling her to keep doing what she was doing but to have more surveillance. Elise replied, "I know you are going to have Noah and the German intelligence on speed dial, but I will be overwhelmed by being followed everywhere." Rachel's expression was serious. "I think we should have someone shadowing you at all times, at least until they can find out who is behind this." Elise's eyes widened. "But that's a bit extreme, isn't it?" Rachel shook her head. "It's necessary. I'm sorry, Elise, but we need to take this seriously. I can't risk you getting hurt." She yanked the drawer open in frustration, moving the contents to the left and right, yet she still did not see it. She looked back at the desk, then turned back to the drawer. Glancing up, she picked up her phone. She could have sworn that she had placed the pen in the left corner drawer 5 days ago. But now, after going through all the drawers, she still could not find it. She put the phone back down and paused at the middle drawer. She moved back to the right. She tended not to use the middle because it was always so difficult to open. At the edge, she now placed her hand on the middle and gave it a good yank. The entire drawer came out. "What the?" She bent her knees so that she could look into the drawer at the open cavity. As she was about to push the drawer back in, she saw something taped to the end, which was why it was stuck. She murmured as she pushed her hand in and pulled the tape out, along with a small moleskin notebook.
Placing it on top of the desk and looking to see if she had missed anything. She shuffled through the contents of the drawer before pushing it back in. She reached up to rub the back of her neck, wondering where the pen was as she turned the page of her moleskin book.
Opening the book, she saw the front page was numbered, but everything was written in Farsi. She could only make out a handful of words, as although she was conversational in the language, her command of it was limited to speaking, not reading and writing fluently. She uttered a "er" as she picked up the USB, turned it over, and took a picture with her phone. She then slipped it into the reader on her desk. The drive appeared to be the translation of the book, and a few words jumped out. Stunned, she stopped and stared out the window as she reached for her phone to call Elise Rachel. "Where are you, Elise?" "Elise, just left a lecture and getting ready to pack up." "Why? What's happening?"
"I'll pick you up in 10 minutes.
"You're free this afternoon? I thought you had that meeting with..." "Wait, what's his name again?"
Glancing at her calendar, she replied, "Isabel can reschedule. See you soon."
She saw Elise standing outside of the lecture hall as she pulled up. "Why aren't you inside?" Rachel asked. Elise pointed over to the right. "That's one of my campus security shadows," she continued. "So tell me, what has you so wired that you want to take off in the middle of the day?"
"I was looking for my silver pen that my grandmother gave me. I checked all my pockets, bags, and drawers, but I couldn't find it."
Petting her arm, Elise said, "Maybe it's at home."
Huh, I didn't think of that. Anyways, I found something more interesting.
"I'll tell you more at home," she said excitedly, as she pulled the book from her jacket pocket and handed it to Elise. "It was tucked away in a drawer of my desk," Elise said, looking at Rachel in surprise. She turned the pages, stopping at a diagram. "Very interesting," she said. Rachel also found a USB drive, which she plugged into Elise's laptop. "Looks like they were trying to translate it, but this word here is not the same," Elise said, pointing to the laptop screen in the notebook. Rachel smiled.
"You're the expert. I'm only conversational fluent. Yes, but if this has real meaning, we'll need a native speaker. I grew up in the States, so I hardly qualify. Perhaps my uncle?" Her face lit up.
"That would be great. Do you think he has time?" Elise smiled. "I'll give him a call and see if he can help us out."
She said Greta creeped the line to accepting appears to him. But I don't know how the chap is in Turkey.
She said, "I don't live or tell me if he was crying in cells. She know that ain't certain. Then we get a cop and force with the things. They've asked he was crying as it be nowhere. She says she took his chest the fakest and actually knew the form and put his..."
Rachel and Elise arrived at Elise's uncle's house. Eager to get his help with the secret notebook, they were greeted warmly by Elise's aunt and ushered into the dining room, where a delicious dinner was already set out. Rachel's mouth watered at the sight of the traditional Iranian dishes. After dinner, Rachel and Elise settled down in the living room with Elise's uncle. Rachel handed him the notebook, explaining the situation. He opened it and began to read, his brow furrowing as he read the text. "This is written in a very old dialect of Farsi," he said, looking up from the notebook. "It's difficult to read and understand." Rachel pulled out some printed pages from her bag and laid them on the table. She pointed to them and said, "This was also found with the notebook." Elise's uncle picked up the pages and examined them. He nodded in recognition. Someone had started to translate this. He said, "I can finish the job for you." Rachel smiled in relief. "That would be great. Thank you so much." Elise's uncle nodded and got to work. Rachel and Elise watched in anticipation as he read through the pages, translating the words into English. After a few minutes, he laid down the pages and looked up at them. Elise's uncle looked up from the notebook and said, "As a practicing physician, the works discussed here are simply extraordinary." He pulled Elise closer and said, "Look at this diagram. If this can be tested and proven to work, then we will have a new way to treat many diseases." He smiled at Elise, the excitement in his eyes palpable. Rachel and Elise exchanged a surprised glance. "This is amazing," Rachel said, her voice filled with awe. Elise's uncle nodded. "Yes, it is. We must research this further and see if the theory can be tested and proven true." He patted Elise on the shoulder and said, "You two have found something special here. I am so proud of you both." Elise replied, "Thank you, Uncle." He then looked at Rachel and asked, "Are you free this weekend?" Rachel nodded. "Yes, the weekend sounds good."
Hadar Hafetz, she says as she reaches for her bag. "Jonathan, I'm so excited. We found some historical teachings on how to cure diseases. My uncle is looking at it. Does he believe that it is good?" "Yes, he even suggested running a few studies to verify." "Hold on a second, I got a resume for a promising candidate. Let's talk to your uncle and see if he sees a fit. We can always add one more person to the team. I will check with him and touch base later." "This is great, Elise. She's a medical researcher with a lot of experience in the field. Can we hire her?" he asked as he looked over her shoulder. "If Jonathan thinks she is available, then yes."
Elise was busy in her laboratory, researching the historical teachings they had found on how to cure diseases. She had been poring over the ancient texts for weeks and was finally beginning to see some promising results. Suddenly, her phone rang, interrupting her concentration. She answered it and was surprised to hear Jonathan's voice on the other end. "Elise, I'm coming to visit in a few days," he said. "This will give us a chance to catch up. I will also bring Jean Marie. Can you have your uncle available so that he can see if she is a fit?" Elise replied, "Yes, he's free around lunchtime, so I will plan something around that time. Should we do it at the house or a restaurant?" "Just so you know, Rachel, more likely we'll be tied up," to which Jonathan replied, "My daughter, the workaholic, is always tied up. If it's not too much trouble, let's do it at the house." Elise agreed. "Sounds good. See you then." Elise was anxious as she waited for Jonathan to arrive. She had been preparing for his visit for days, making sure everything was in order. As she looked over the table, she noted that Miriam had done a wonderful job of setting up a variety of vegetarian and meat dishes, ensuring that there was something for everyone. Jonathan quickly introduced the woman as Jean Marie, a medical researcher who had come to assist with their project. Elise was instantly taken with Jean Marie. She was smart, articulate, and had a wealth of experience in the field. She turned to her uncle, who nodded. Then she looked at Jonathan and smiled. Getting the go-ahead, Jonathan said, "Jean Marie, if you were to join the team, Elise could continue her lecture series as well as her research work in New York. What do you think?" Jean Marie smiled and nodded. She was excited to join the groundbreaking team and work with Elise. "I'm in," she said. Her uncle spoke up. "We have the framework laid out for initial testing. Jonathan, we can run the first batch in New York or here. The time difference is not an issue as all the computers are wired for access from anywhere. So it's really up to you both," he said, pointing to Elise, and her uncle. Elise looked to Jean Marie. "Are you comfortable living and working in Berlin?" she asked. "I know it's selfish, but let's do the initial study here as we will be living here for the foreseeable future." "Jean Marie, I have no commitments in New York, so I can be here, and it would be a real honor to be part of your team," she said, looking at Elise.
Jonathan and Elise were sitting in the living room, surrounded by piles of research papers and ancient texts. Deep in conversation, Rachel then burst into the room, out of breath and looking excited. "I found it," she exclaimed, holding up a small velvet pouch. "I finally found Grandma's Tiffany pen." Elise's eyes lit up and she jumped to her feet, rushing over to Rachel. "Where did you find it?" she asked, practically bouncing with excitement. "My earrings fell and rolled under the bed. I bent to pick them up, then I saw it," Rachel explained. "I had been searching for weeks." Jonathan smiled as he stood up and gave Rachel a hug. "This is amazing," he said. "Searching for the pen has led us to this wealth of research," pointing to the documents on the table. Rachel looked over at her dad and Elise. "Is any of it good?" Elise replied, "Rachel, you know it's a good idea to have Isabel do some digging. She can speak with the other assistants informally and get a true picture of what happened. It would provide a framework to understand how they passed on this opportunity."
Jonathan nodded in agreement. Isabel would be perfect for this, he said. Rachel smiled. I'll speak with her tomorrow. Rachel then said to Isabel, cancel all my meetings for the rest of the day. Isabel looked up in surprise. Is everything okay, Rachel? She asked. Rachel sighed. It's that darn project that got shelved. I can't seem to figure out why it was put on hold. Isabel was interested. What project is that? Rachel explained. It was a new product that had so much potential, but for some reason it was put on the back burner. I just can't understand it. Isabel, determined. Well, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. I'm going to talk to the assistants of the division heads and see if they know anything. Rachel, surprised. Isabel, that's a great idea. Maybe you can uncover something that I missed. Isabel, smiling. I'll do my best. Rachel cut to. It's office day. Isabel approaches the assistant's desk and introduces herself. Hi, I'm Isabel. I'm Rachel's assistant. I was wondering if I could ask you a few questions about the company. Assistant 1, cautious, I don't know. My boss is pretty private about company matters. Isabel, persistent. I understand, but I'm just trying to get a better understanding of how things work here. And I'm particularly interested in the project that was recently shelved. Do you know why that happened? Assistant. Well, I heard that there were some issues with the budget. It was just too expensive to move forward with the project, and Gerhard was pretty difficult to deal with.
Gerhard. I see. It was a big backlash. He went down to the labs and told the lead scientist, I don't care about your discoveries or your potential cures. All I care about is the bottom line. She continued to talk to the assistants of the other division heads, gathering more information about the shelved project. She learned that there were also problems with the timeline and the proposed design. Finally, Isabel returned to Rachel's office to report her findings. Rachel, I think I figured out why the project was shelved. Tell me everything, Isabel. I talked to the assistants of the division heads, and they said that the team was shocked and devastated when Gerhard shut them down. He told them that they were burning too much capital, and there was nothing that they could do because they had just sold the company and believed that Gerhard would have backed their research. I say thanks for all your hard work, Isabel. Isabel and Parker had become fast friends, often meeting for lunch or work drinks. They were standing outside at the coffee cart when they saw the CFO rush out of a nearby parked car. Parker tapped Isabel on the shoulder and said of her boss, she has been really jittery this week. How so? Isabel asked. Normally, she is really focused in the mornings, but this last week she has been jumping to pick things up from the printer and taking her phone to the bathroom every hour. Parker replied, Rachel is off to Zurich this week to meet with Neil, so everything should be relatively quiet on the corporate side. Nate overheard their conversation and sat down. Maybe she is being headhunted, he suggested. This is by far one of the best jobs in the industry. Isabel said the pay and working for Rachel Woods, no one else can match that. Parker looks over at Nate. They had heard the CFO ranting before they became friends with Isabel. Nate nods and says maybe she doesn't want to work for Rachel. Isabel stares at him incredulously and says, what? She then continues. In the early days, she used to say that she was fed up that an outsider was running the company. It was her who had started the rumor that Rachel was going to sell the company off. Nate replies, yeah, and Rachel worked really hard to get all the division heads on board, and now everyone is working together and feels connected to the new research program that Elise and Jean-Marie are spearheading. Isabel then points to the car still parked across from the coffee cart and says, so, what is she printing off and carrying to midday meetings?
Fear is sin. I've been to you, a world I couldn't out attempt. I wasted a step and gave a string. The corner stormed alone. I felt all alone. I gave to you novel.
She then gets up, goes to the coffee cart, orders a latte, and discreetly takes out her phone, snapping pictures of the car and the driver leaning against the door. Parker and Nate came up to her. "Who is he?" Nate asked. "I have to run. I'll let you know more later," she said, and dashed off to her office. She passed by the head of IT and said, "Clive, Rachel asked that I give you a heads up. She is sending a memo out to all the division heads letting them know that they will only have access to files related to their department on the server." He looked down at his keyboard and typed, "Thanks for the heads up, Isabel. I think that is a great idea. Here is the file that you were looking for," she said as she approached Isabel and pointed to Rachel's office. She whispered, "She was printing these. I grabbed them, and when she came looking, I said the printer must have jammed." Isabel looks down and sees the diagram. It was the same one that Elise and Jean-Marie had sent to Rachel for review last week. She snaps a picture and says, "Thanks, Parker. You are a lifesaver." She sends a quick text to Rachel along with the pictures of the mysterious car and walks over to the elevator to go down to the research level. As the elevator doors opened, she saw Elise reaching for the doors of the lab. Isabel shouted, "Elise!" Elise stopped and turned around, surprised to see Isabel rushing towards her. Elise asked, "Hey Isabel, what's going on?" Isabel took a deep breath before speaking. "I'm sorry to tell you this, but I think the CFO has been copying your research files." Elise's eyes widened in shock. "What? Are you sure?" Isabel nodded her head solemnly and handed the files to Jean-Marie. Elise said, "Come inside." As she opened the doors and called Jean-Marie, she then pointed to Isabel and said to Jean-Marie, "Parker grabbed these off the printer." While waiting for Rachel to pick up her phone, Elise punched in her number and paced back and forth in the conference room. "I have texted her, Jean-Marie. We have been working on this ceaselessly day and night." She looks at Elise. "We cannot allow any leaks at this stage. We have to figure out a way to stop her and protect our work. We need to act now. I have told Clive that Rachel is sending out a memo that division heads will only have access to files in their groups." Elise stares at her. Her phone rings. "Here is Rachel now. I am on my way back. I have sent over Helga. Please, can you go to my office and meet her with Isabel?" Elise replied, "Yes, Jean-Marie. Let's lock up and go up to Rachel's office. She's on her way back and has called in resources to help us." Jean-Marie nodded in agreement.
Jean-Marie nodded in agreement before they both left the lab. They hurried up the stairs and into their boss's office, determined to put an end to the CFO's plot. Helga walked in and smiled at Isabel. "I hear you have been busy," she said. Isabel replied, "I had some help. Elise and Jean-Marie can explain better what's in the document, but Parker picked it up from the printer. The CFO is printing it, and it's not something she should be working on." Helga looked alarmed, her brow furrowing with concern. "That's concerning," she said. "Ida has been working here for years." Helga, listen to what Isabel and Parker are saying. "It looks like she's been involved in some pretty shady activities lately." Isabel puts her phone on the desk. "The car dropped her off when we were taking a coffee break earlier, and her assistant Parker says she has been acting jittery." "Let me see the plates on the car." She taps the numbers into her phone, then looks up at Elise. "Elise, what? We need to investigate further and find out who she has been working with." Helga began to speak, but stopped as the door opened and Rachel walked in. Rachel looked at Helga and said, "I want this taken care of today." Helga replied, "We have been doing some digging and believe she received a series of payments within the last few months." Jean-Marie said, "That was quick." Helga replied, "No, not really. We have been tracking the division head's financial activity from the last operation. The system was triggered when the cash started moving." Elise then pointed to Rachel and Helga and said to Jean-Marie, "They have been friends for years, and Isabel here is Helga's cousin on her mother's side." Jean-Marie asked, "Do we have enough to stop her?" Helga looked down at her phone and said, "Yes, the car is registered to the same operatives from before." She then looked over to Rachel and asked, "Are you planning on doing it yourself?" Rachel replied, yes, I want this taken care of today. Isabel, can you have Clive cut off her access and have security meet me downstairs?
Are you planning on doing it yourself?
Let's go together. Isabel said to have Parker meet us in her office. Come on, she grabs Helga's arm. Let's go fight crime.
You like this, huh?
I could really do without the backstabbing, she said as they walk into the CFO's office. Ida looks up in surprise. I thought you were away, she says with a sneer.
You know how it is, I had to take the jet out for a spin?
She looks over at Helga to signal. Rachel.
Are you being headhunted, Ida?
What do you mean? Offen so einen Kanten faster that Cybersecurity tief from first April and the crumstance of the dawings. She's Clyro Bayer, the turn-looking sound of batters and first thing. To the cranes monens with a stop sit calm way. But she feels so first a returnable out of the sired. The one she'll astures so much that that's like front, but she's chic racked. And Lam Hadabai is at the heart of Gast. The one she'll is starning, just desired, and no way have a first babble spare. To the ring down of the sea.
I'm asking if you're being headhunted by another company. I know you've been copying research files from the lab, and I want to know why.
That's none of your business.
Actually, it is my business, since I'm the CEO of this company. So, what's going on? Ida looks over at Helga, who is silently recording the conversation. She takes a deep breath before speaking again. I was approached by another company who wanted me to give them access to our research files. They offered me a lot of money in exchange for helping them out. You betrayed us. You've been stealing from us all this time? It wasn't like that. I was just trying to secure a better future for myself and my family. They offered me a lot of money in exchange for helping them out. You betrayed us. You've been stealing from us all this time? It wasn't like that. I was just trying to secure a better future for myself and my family. They offered me a lot of money in exchange for helping them out. You betrayed us. You've been stealing from us all this time? It wasn't like that. I was just trying to secure a better future for myself and my family. I do have an undergraduate degree in chemistry. They offered me a lot of money in exchange for helping them out. You betrayed us. You've been stealing from us all this time? It wasn't like that. I was just trying to secure a better future for myself and my family. I do have an undergraduate degree in chemistry. They offered me a lot of money in exchange for helping them out. You betrayed us. You've been stealing from us all this time? It wasn't like that. I was just trying to secure a better future for myself and my family. I see, she says, nodding. I agree with you. Why don't you all take an early day? She turns to Isabel. Can you send an email letting folks know that an early day is in session? If they're in the middle of something and feel they can't take the day, let them know that one extra personal day will be added to their files.
Please let Human Resources know about this change. Elise taps her fingers while looking at her. Also, please let Human Resources know that I would like to have a meeting. You can schedule it early next week as there is room on my calendar. She then walks up to Nate, Isabel, and Parker and shakes each of their hands, murmuring thank you and winking at Elise, saying early night. Yes. She walks over to John Marie and says, it can wait until tomorrow. Go home and get some rest.
Is it really over?
For now.
She buzzes the intercom. I have Felix from HR for your 1 o'clock.
Rachel's bell, please send him in. Looking around nervously, everyone had been on edge since the police were on site last week. I have added the additional personal day to the employee's files, he begins. Rizabel looks up from the report in her hand and says to Felix, it has come to my attention that the support staff in the labs are paid less compared to other support staff. Was this instituted by Gerhard? Looking up, Felix replies, he would say that folks who wanted to work in the labs would take on less pay for the opportunity to move on to the research team, so we were giving them a shot. Rachel responds, yes, I can see him saying that. Did they move over to the research team? Felix shakes his head. Not really. They tended to quit after a few months, citing burnout. Rachel inquires, do we currently have anyone on the support team that expressed an interest in being in research? Felix picks up his laptop and taps a few keys, 2 people and Parker from the finance group. Rachel presses her buzzer. Isabel, can you see if Elise is free to join us? Isabel replies, give me 2 minutes. Rachel says firmly, I want to provide a bonus to Isabel, Parker, and Nate for their help in uncovering the corporate espionage plot. Felix looked up from his paperwork, taken aback by Rachel's request. Are you sure? He asked. Rachel nodded.
I'm sure they deserve to be rewarded for their hard work in dedication in uncovering this plot and stopping it before it could cause any more damage.
Felix considered the request. Will 1 week of extra pay work? Rachel thought for a moment. Let's do 2 weeks. Felix could see that she was serious about rewarding people for their contribution to the company. He tapped a few keys on his computer as Elise and Isabel walked in. Isabel asked if anyone wanted water, tea, or coffee, looking at Felix. Water is fine, he said. Elise took a seat in the chair across from Rachel. Water for me, Isabel, she said. Rachel smiled.
Coffee is fine, Isabel.
Felix moved his laptop to Elise. These 2 people on the support staff had wanted to be part of the research team.
Elise murmured, interesting, as she leaned closer. We could use the help at this stage, she said, looking up at Rachel. Isabel walked in and placed the beverage down before exiting. Felix asked, do you want me to speak with them? Rachel turned to Elise and said, Felix, can you send the resumes to Jean-Marie, please? Also, include Parker's. She then took a drink of her coffee and asked, if they all accept, will you need additional support staff? Looking to Felix, let me have a few days, and I'll get back to you, she said, rising. I have a conference call with New York, so I have to run off.
Thank you, he nodded as he rose from the chair.
Felix, Isabel will put something on the calendar, but it is safe to say, check in with Parker and explain that if she were to join the research team as a junior researcher, she would not see a pay cut. Also, if those 2 other candidates choose to stay in support, please scale their salaries to be in line with the standard support staff. I want that feudal practice by Gerhard gone.
Yes, Rachel. He smiled as he picked up his water and left at the door. He asked Isabel. Elise said she wants a few days, and Rachel said you will put it on the calendar. He asked with a smile.
Maybe next week. Same time? I'll let you know later.
Sure thing, he said as he walked back to his office. Elise was on the brink of exhaustion for weeks. She and the rest of the team had been working tirelessly to run various tests in tandem. She was about ready to call it a night when her phone buzzed with an incoming message from her uncle. Elise, I got an email from Jean-Marie at 2 the and I'm concerned that if she keeps pushing herself this hard, she will soon burn out. Elise could feel a lump rising in her throat as she reread the message. She knew that her uncle cared deeply for the work and wanted what was best for her, but at the same time she felt a sense of guilt that he had noticed how hard Jean-Marie was working while she hadn't even noticed herself. She called Felix and asked if he was free to come to her office the next day.
Elise said to Felix, let's offer junior research positions to the 2 support staff members on the team, along with a salary package that reflects the junior research. I know that Jean-Marie had been giving them tasks at this level, and I feel confident they would be able to handle it with some guidance. Felix replied,
Okay, I will have this ready by this afternoon. What about Parker?
Elise responded, I think she is happy with Neil's acting CFO role and Rachel trusts her in that role long term. Elise questioned before her phone rang and she took the call. Then, pointing to 2 empty chairs,
Felix replied, "Well, do I have some folks in mind?"
Okay, she points to the phone. Later that night, as they were going home, Elise said to Rachel, "We have promoted the 2 support staff members to junior researchers." Rachel smiled in approval. "That's a great idea. They have proven themselves to be key assets and deserve to be rewarded for their hard work and dedication."
Elise nodded her head in agreement.
"Yes, I'm really proud of them for all that they have accomplished. With Jean-Marie's help, I'm sure they will continue to grow and develop their skills even further."
Smolvas, that she feels the capitalist with the Orizes. She feels the capitalist with the Orizes, with a woman that Miss Edel Scratch was in theory. They can force him, simcliff relate verso. Night storms, she smeeks his part to feel hungry, sometimes hitting him much the smorf time, and help she find a lave waste. Yenes employs. The find ways are chat. The feature is maven always, compute in yourself. She nest and tenure deal is. She seemed smiled. And Borna, the dry finally in the Nashville. And the moment, the dream and fars the force every lurf. Who Wayne stide the crusty us, he showed in the best of omen, of the fire, to Borist, a kiss you've catch, who was again, and shaped. The mountain of Mies Oswald you relief take and always salt. You creator, it's merely if come with pounding from the ground sleet. They kill you away, will always hat fall and hours. He lights a phase from my hurt self, his fash and his whole the bus soft. A money, who beautiful soft greenchen, to sheet a peace house, with its rep and be tense. Felix replied, "Well, do I have some folks in mind?"
Okay, she points to the phone. Later that night, as they were going home, Elise said to Rachel, "We have promoted the 2 support staff members to junior researchers." Rachel smiled in approval. "That's a great idea. They have proven themselves to be key assets and deserve to be rewarded for their hard work and dedication."
Elise nodded her head in agreement.
"Yes, I'm really proud of them for all that they have accomplished. With Jean-Marie's help, I'm sure they will continue to grow and develop their skills even further."
Thinks since that as members of the dreams in Fast Charlotte. Is he putting would tie her into a moment? And she used to run trades that you created ashes. A basket so hook, potentially into her hands.
Bread in plams we're still crowd is the 4 from the breast and the gaze. The special toolrization, the thou bliss us surprised in grades. And she lines, to me refo the left in face.
The big toiler glace, feelings would be underneath, braced.
Instead there's still muchin, suffers glagery, and she scrub.
Rachel, whispering. Who was there? Rachel sits down on the edge of her bed and takes a deep breath, trying to calm herself. Suddenly, she hears a noise from outside. She jumps to her feet, her heart pounding. She whispers, "Who's there?" Hearing no response, she slowly walks to the door and opens it, looking down the hallway, but it's empty. She closes the door and slowly walks back to her bed. Rachel whispers again, "Who was there?" Rachel mumbled to herself, "It's just the wind. I'm just being paranoid," as she sat down on her bed and took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. She closed her eyes, attempting to go back to sleep. The alarm then went off and she got up, heading to the kitchen to make coffee. As she finished grinding the beans, Miriam, her housekeeper, walked in. She looked Rachel up and down and said, "I could have gotten up earlier," as she placed the beans in the French press. Miriam gave Rachel a sympathetic look and shook her head. "You should be sleeping, not grinding coffee beans," she said. Rachel shrugged and replied, "I couldn't sleep." Understanding, Miriam nodded and put a hand on Rachel's shoulder. Everyone knows the story of the young executive that almost got burned to flames, she said, tears welling in her eyes. Rachel thanked her. Miriam smiled warmly and squeezed Rachel's shoulder gently. "Anytime, my dear," she said. She looks up at Miriam, her eyes tired. She forces a smile. "Yes, she should be back tomorrow." "Ah, good. I'm sure she'll love to hear about your visit. Now let's get this breakfast ready. It'll help lift your spirits." Smiling weakly, she nods her head in agreement and sits down at the kitchen table. She watches as Miriam quickly moves around the kitchen, gathering ingredients for Rachel's favorite breakfast dish. The conference should end by the end of the week on Wednesday, and she wants to spend Friday at the hospital labs. She texted Isabel asking, "Can you make me an appointment with Dr. Khan? Tell him that Helga had recommended his services." Isabel replied, "Do you have some free time this morning? Should I schedule it then?" Rachel answered, "Sure, I will just work from home for the rest of the day. If there are any meetings, please reschedule them." Isabel said, "Okay." Rachel took a deep breath as she sat down in the chair across from Dr. Khan, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked at the decorations in his office. Dr. Khan tilted his head and smiled and said, "I hear that you are a friend of Helga's. What brings you here today?" Rachel took another deep breath and looked down at her hands, unable to look him in the eye. "I'm having trouble sleeping," she said.
I've been having nightmares and flashbacks to things that happened in the past.
What things? He asked, waiting for her to decide what she wants to share. She takes a deep breath and looks away, trying to gather her thoughts. After a few moments, she looks up at him, her expression somber.
I have been having flashbacks to things that happened in my past, and it has been making it hard for me to concentrate on anything else. I also cannot sleep, and when I do, it is usually filled with nightmares.
Was there something that happened recently to set this off?
Yes, we had to fire the CFO. I cannot go into it right now as the case is still being investigated. I just need a few solid hours of sleep.
He gives her an understanding look and squeezes her hand gently.
That's okay. We can work on this together and take things at your own pace. For now, let's focus on the things you can do to help manage your symptoms.
Her face softening slightly as she looks up at him. She nods her head in agreement.
That sounds good. Thank you, doctor. I can provide a prescription for a sleep aid, but it would be helpful if you reduced your work hours.
She takes a deep breath and looks away, her expression incredulous.
Reduce my work hours.
He nods his head slowly and smiles gently.
Of course. You need time to deal with the events that have triggered your PTSD, and it won't help to drive your feelings into some hidden corner by working 20 hours a day. I can provide a prescription for a sleep aid if that is helpful, but it would be better for you to give yourself time for recovery.
She looks out the window. After a few moments, she looks back at him and nods her head slowly.
I understand. She gets up, picks up the prescription, and leaves the office.
Reaching out, he takes her hand and gives it a gentle squeeze.
You can do this. I'm here to help you every step of the way.
I know.
As she got into her car to head back home, her phone rang. It was Helga.
She took a deep breath and looked at her phone, her heart tightening. "Hi," she said. "Rachel, I just heard from Isabel that you were taking the day off and wanted to make sure everything is all right." She took a deep breath and closed her eyes, trying to keep her emotions in check.
Yeah, everything's fine. I just needed some time for myself.
She paused for a moment before saying softly,
Is there anything I can do to help?
"No, I'm okay. I took your advice and went to see Dr. Khan." Helga nodded.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. Why don't I stop by later?
"Sure, I'll be home. Come by after you finish up."
I've been having nightmares and flashbacks to things that happened in the past.
"What things?" he asked, waiting for her to decide what she wants to share. She takes a deep breath and looks away, trying to gather her thoughts. After a few moments, she looks up at him, her expression somber.
I have been having flashbacks to things that happened in my past, and it has been making it hard for me to concentrate on anything else. I also cannot.
Helga smiled. See you then. Rachel was in the study when Miriam came bustling in, excitedly beckoning with her fingers. Rachel, come. You have to see this, she said. As Helga was outside looking in the back of her Land Rover, Rachel got up and pulled on her hoodie. Ooh, why didn't she come in? Rachel asked Miriam. Miriam grinned. Go on. I'll have snacks set up in the dining room. Rachel rushed outside and looked at the two German shepherds, her eyes widening in surprise. Helga grinned and knelt beside them, rubbing their heads. I thought they could help with your PTSD. They're both very well trained and have a gentle disposition. Rachel shook her head, still not sure. I don't know how Elise feels about pets in New York. We never had any. Helga stands up and puts her hands on Rachel's shoulders. Come on, it'll be fun. These two will make all the difference in your recovery, she says. The two women walk outside with the German shepherds and start to explore the rear of the house. As they walk, Rachel starts to feel more relaxed and finds herself really enjoying the company of the two dogs. Rachel asks, you say that they are fully trained, so guard dogs? Helga replies, yes. Rachel then inquires, can you show me some of the tricks they can do? Helga grins and motions for the dogs to come to her side. Of course, these two are experts at obeying commands. Watch this, she says. Helga then proceeds to demonstrate some of the tricks that the dogs can do, from sitting to stay, to playing catch and fetch, to responding to basic commands like sit and stay. Rachel is amazed at how obedient and well-trained the dogs are, and she feels more confident knowing that she has two extra protectors with her. They walk back to the front of the house, only to find that Miriam had laid out water bowls for the two pups. Helga looks at Rachel and smirks, saying, I guess Miriam loves them. Rachel smiles as she looks down at the two pups lapping up water. Rachel then suggests, let's go see if she will give us snacks too. Miriam looked over at the two of them and scolded, go and wash your hands. I have made fried chicken and salad. Helga exclaimed, wow, you should work from home more often, Rachel. As they sat down, Rachel said, I'm thinking that I need to hire a candidate that can oversee finances and contracts. Helga replied, you could take someone from another company, or you could develop the person to handle decisions the way you need them to. Rachel nodded. Yes, that is true. The only problem is, oftentimes an individual's strength is either in finance or contracts, so training will be time-consuming without assurance of a positive outcome. Helga suggested, what about the 3 superstars that you have there now?
Rachel smiled. Yes, they are a great start. I just need someone to manage them and ensure that they have what they need to be successful. Helga replied, well, you could look into their potential by giving them new tasks or challenges that they may not have done before. If they are successful, then you know that you have a team of individuals who can be trusted with more responsibility. Rachel nodded. You're right. I can use the new product launch that Elise and Jean-Marie are planning as their training ground. It will be sufficiently challenging for them to prove themselves. She took out her phone and tapped out a message to Isabel. As she put the phone down, she said, the only problem is that I will lose Isabel as an assistant. Helga replied, but think about what you gain in the long run, a stronger, well-trained corporate decision maker. The next day, Rachel called Isabel, Parker, and Nate into the conference room as Elise and Jean-Marie were attending a conference in New York and could not participate. Nate looked at Isabel and Parker, his brow furrowed in concentration, and said, so Rachel wants us to head up a new division? Isabel replied, it seems that way. She told us to develop a budget and a marketing plan. Parker then inquired, but what about the new discoveries Jean-Marie and Elise are working on? How does that factor into this? Rachel, walking into the room with her eyes brimming with excitement, said, that's the best part.
The new division will be focused around those discoveries. You'll have the chance to create something entirely new, something that could revolutionize the industry. Nate nodded slowly, taking it all in, and asked, "This is big. So what do we need to do first?" Rachel began to pace around the room, gesturing as she spoke. "First, you need to put together a team of people who have specialized experience in different areas. Then you'll need to develop a budget and marketing plan. I can provide you with some resources if you like." Isabel nodded in agreement and said, "Okay, sounds like we have our work cut out for us. Let's get started." Rachel looks at Parker and Isabel and said, "Remember, this is internal, so you can leverage existing resources to ensure that the launch goes smoothly and that the budget is adequate to cover all pertinent expenses. Nate, you'll need to get the key contract points and create a new contract for this division. Leave the name of the product for last, as Jean-Marie and Elise will want to weigh in on that." Nate nods as he selects a contract from his computer and begins typing. Rachel then says to Parker, "You'll need to gather some information from the finance team and marketing team as to what the budget was used for the last product launch." All of this will need to be worked out with Jean-Marie and Elise, but at least you will be prepared. She looked at Isabel and said, "You will need to run some studies to determine which markets would be optimal to enter first, and how much it would cost to have a full sales team versus a segmented approach." She capped the marker, leaving the notes on the bulletin board, and added, "This is a guide. You should use this room as the primary work area up until the launch date," before walking out the door and closing it softly behind her. The three of them then spent the next few hours discussing their plans for the project, developing resources for their team, and finally hashing out a budget and marketing plan. Jean-Marie looked over at Elise as she walked into the lab, her eyes glittering. "Have you seen the launch room?" she asked. Elise smiled and nodded. "Yes, I saw it earlier today. It looks amazing." Jean-Marie laughed and shook her head. "You do have a knack for making things happen." She knew coming to Berlin to work with Elise was a once-in-a-lifetime decision. Elise shrugged modestly. "I just want to make sure we give Isabel, Parker, and Nate what they need to succeed with their new division. This could be the beginning of something big, something revolutionary." Jean-Marie nodded and looked around at the lab one more time, a hint of pride in her voice. "I think they'll be able to do it. They have the right skill set and the right attitude. And Rachel is giving them room to grow, while ensuring that they develop as a leader. She is something else." Elise nodded, thinking back to the day she had returned from New York to find 2 German Shepherd dogs following Rachel around, and a bottle of sleeping pills in the bathroom cabinet. She had decided not to dig into the changes, but had noticed that Rachel was taking time to run with the dogs before dinner, and had been sleeping better, even though she still got up very early. As the launch day approached, Jean-Marie, Rachel, and Elise were invited to the conference room. Rachel looked around the room, her eyes alight with excitement. "I can't believe this is finally happening." Elise grinned and nodded. "I know, it's amazing to see the product of all our hard work." Jean-Marie turned to Isabel, Parker, and Nate with a smile. "I'm so glad you 3 were able to take this project off the ground." Nate grinned and scratched the back of his neck, seeming a bit overwhelmed. "We were just lucky enough to get the chance. It's been a lot of work, but we made it happen." Isabel nodded in agreement, her eyes shining with pride. "You bet. And now we have a room full of division heads who are helping us make sure we have everything in order for the launch tomorrow."
Parker turned to Elise and Jean-Marie, her expression serious. Without your help, none of this would be possible. We owe you both a huge debt of gratitude. Jean-Marie and Elise exchanged a look before bursting into laughter. They had worked hard for this moment, the late nights running study after study, but as scientists they were rarely rewarded. Rachel then asked, "What do you think? Should we set this up as the office that the three of you will share for the products? Or return to a conference room?" Nate replied, "I think having an office for the three of us would be ideal. We can keep all the information in one place and have access to each other whenever we need it." Isabel nodded in agreement. "Plus, it will also give us a better idea of how much space we'll need when the division grows." Parker agreed. "That sounds great. I think having an office will make our day-to-day operations much smoother and more efficient." Rachel smiled, pleased with their decision. "All right then, how about you all get a good night's sleep? Tomorrow will be a long day. The press will be here to interview Jean-Marie and Elise," she said, beaming with pride. The world was abuzz this morning with the news of a groundbreaking medical breakthrough, led by esteemed researchers Elise, Shahi, Jean-Marie, and German Pharma. The team has just successfully launched a new treatment plan that has the potential to revolutionize healthcare research. The plan is based on their extensive research and includes an innovative approach to medicine, integrating both traditional and cutting-edge treatments. This revolutionary plan promises a new era of health and wellness for people everywhere. The plans have already been embraced by major hospitals and universities around the world, with many more expected to join in soon. With this news, many people are looking forward to a brighter future for healthcare, one that promises care for everyone no matter where they are. Rachel was getting off the elevator when she bumped into Felix. "Felix, Rachel, I have good news," he said with a smile. "Great, what's up?" "I've been getting interest from folks at other pharma companies and resumes from recent grads. Everyone wants to come here." He opened his arms and spun around. "Everyone?" She walked over and patted him on the shoulder. "We should do a study to see what areas need to be beefed up. I'm not sure if we will launch a new division anytime soon. I think the scientists may want to enjoy their success from this venture and, take a vacation," she said, winking at him. "But bring me some analysts, and we can suggest it to the other divisions. I'll see you later at the party," she said as she pivoted and walked down the corridor to her office. Parker turned to Elise and Jean-Marie, her expression serious. "Without your help, none of this would be possible. We owe you both a huge debt of gratitude." Jean-Marie and Elise exchanged a look before bursting into laughter. They had worked hard for this moment. The kitchen was bustling with people coming in and dropping off food, making it hard to track who was who. Miriam was outside setting up a table under the canopy when she noticed a delivery van open, and the driver darted into the kitchen. Uneasy, she snapped her fingers for the pups and walked back into the house to investigate. Inside, the kitchen was a flurry of activity. Miriam saw the delivery driver unloading boxes of food onto the counter and talking to the chef that they had hired for the event. She quickly stepped in and asked what was going on. The chef explained that the driver had brought a special order for the party and that he needed to be paid for it. Miriam thanked him and handed him some cash before he left. With everything in order, Miriam returned outside to finish setting up the table under the canopy. The two dogs followed her, tails wagging happily as they sniffed around for any scraps of food that may have been dropped during all the commotion in the kitchen. Miriam was about to turn back to the table when she noticed the same delivery driver walking around the left side of the house, where Rachel's study was. She quickly followed him, calling out for him to stop. He turned around and apologized, explaining that he had forgotten something in his van and had come back to retrieve it. Miriam thanked him for his honesty and watched as he drove away. Miriam watched as the delivery driver drove away from the house and the gates closed behind him. She then returned to the kitchen, where she asked the chef what was in the special package. The chef explained that it was a selection of rare ingredients for a special dish he was preparing for the party. Miriam placed a call to Jean-Marie, saying, "I don't want to cause an international scandal, but can you come by?
I'm suspicious. Her voice trailing off, Jean-Marie replied that she would be there in 5 minutes and asked if it was all right for her to bring her bag so she could change there. Miriam agreed and hung up the phone. As she worked, Miriam kept an eye out for Jean-Marie's arrival, hoping that she could help her figure out what was going on. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Miriam looked up, surprised. She headed to the door, with Max and Lucy close behind. She opened the door to reveal Jean-Marie, her hair down and a suitcase in one hand. I decided to come right away, she said. Miriam, give me that. She opened a door off the hall and placed Jean-Marie's things carefully. She whispered. The chef said he was making a dish with special ingredients, but I just looked over the list that we submitted to the catering company, and all the dishes would require standard ingredients. Let me just go and poke my head around, try to get Helga on the line and have her drop in. Thank you. She pulls out her phone to call. I see you. I am contragoltem severnuali. And someone walks. The kitchen was bustling with people coming in and dropping off food, making it hard to track who was who. Miriam was outside setting up a table under the canopy when she noticed that the lid... Thank you. She pulls out her phone to call Helga. Miriam looked at Jean-Marie, who stood over the plants with a frown on her face. She could sense that something was wrong, so she snapped her fingers for Max and Lucy and exclaimed, Jesus Christ. Max and Lucy heard the command and immediately transformed from playful pups to fierce guard dogs. Their ears stuck up, their teeth shored, and they were ready for action. Max went to grab the unsuspecting chef by the ankles while Lucy stood over him as he fell to the ground. The chef screamed in terror as he tried to scramble away, but Max had a firm grip on him. Miriam shouted for him to stay still, but he continued to struggle. Suddenly, a group of men burst into the kitchen brandishing guns. Helga followed in their wake, and she looked down at the chef rolling around on the ground with Lucy and Max growling as if they were going to tear him apart. Mother of God, she uttered, and the dogs quieted and went to stand beside Miriam. Miriam quickly hugged Max and Lucy. Jean-Marie looked around. The party is ruined! She scowled. Why would they try to poison us? Helga looked down at the plants in the room full of food. They would have to inventory all of this. Miriam, she asked, could you check if the restaurant at the corner, the one they like to eat at, could accommodate an office party tonight? She picks up her phone and types in a few names for pastry shops. She looks at Jean-Marie and says, why don't you try to get the assistants in the office to let everyone know about the venue change? Miriam has the address. Miriam mutters, this was supposed to be a happy occasion. Helga looks up at her team and says, we have to work quickly. Assume that everything that is opened is potentially poisonous. She looks over at Jean-Marie, who nods and says, make sure that nothing touches your skin. Jean-Marie, these shops are good and vetted. Just order a variety of pastries and have them delivered to the restaurant. I will have someone come and help with the setup. She tapped her phone and Jean-Marie's phone pinged with the incoming message. You have 1 hour to get this all set up and cleared out. She shouted. The room echoed with yes, boss. No one was going to test Helga when she was like this. She went outside and called Rachel, who had gone to have lunch with Elise's uncle. Rachel, we have to change the venue for the party. We had a situation, but Miriam resolved it with some fast thinking, and the help of Max and Lucy. Jean-Marie also helped. Actually, she is here now, working on getting things set up for the new venue. We were planning on coming up later, but I can come now. Stay another hour. It will give us time to get the house back to normal. And the party.
And the party? It was supposed to be a celebration.
Looking up at Jean Marie, busy on the phone. It will be, she says. As Rachel hangs up the phone, Elise looks over and says, "What's going on?" Rachel just winked and said, "Change of venue." The restaurant had opened the back garden and placed several tables and chairs for everyone to sit. The garden was lit up with fairy lights and candles, creating a celebratory atmosphere. There was a small band playing live music, adding to the festive mood. Everyone was in high spirits, enjoying the food and drinks that were served. Champagne was flowing freely, as well as other mixed cocktails. Tables were filled with canapes, cakes, and pastries that were prepared and delivered by the bakeries that Helga and Jean hired for the night. The guests were delighted with the variety of food available, and they couldn't help but indulge in all of it. As they were leaving, Elise reached out and took the owner's hands, thanking him for pulling this off in such a short time. He smiled in relief, glad that his hard work had paid off. Rolling over, Elise said, "This reminds me of when we lived in New York, all the parties and late nights. It was so much fun." Rachel smiled and nodded in agreement. She remembered those days fondly, and it was nice to be reminded of them. Rachel asked, "Should we go back? The company's on the right track now, and I can work remotely a few weeks of the month." Elise thought for a moment before responding. "I think it's a great idea to have more visits," she said, "now that we have more breathing room." Rachel nodded in agreement. "You're right," she said. "We've done a lot of work here, and I think it's important to stay hands-on for the time being. We can always go back to New York later when the venture is more established." "Yes, I think we can get a lot done while we are here," Elise said. "Even though this new venture looks like it's running smoothly, it's still early days, and being hands-on can only benefit us." Rachel got up and said, "Let's go see what's in the kitchen to eat. I gave Miriam the rest of the week off, so we'll have to manage on our own." Elise smiled and nodded in agreement. She was glad that Rachel had given their housekeeper some time off, and she was looking forward to cooking for herself. As they walked downstairs, they could see Max and Lucy moving their water bowl around. "I am here," Rachel said, and pulled Max's collar to her. As she bent to pour food into the bowl, Elise passed her a note. Miriam had written that the pup's breakfast was already dished out. Rachel looked up at the note with the bag of puppy chow in her hand and Lucy looking at her. She shrugged and poured. Elise laughed. "You are such as pushover," she said, smiling as she began rummaging through the cupboards and fridge.
Rachel stood up and said, "Why don't we go for a few days?" Elise looked down at the dogs, raising an eyebrow, and asked, "And what do I do with the Habibis in a Manhattan apartment?" Rachel hummed, "Good point." She bent down and said to Max and Lucy, "Guess what? You both did so well that I'm going to send you for refresher training." She gets up and taps her phone, tapping a message to Helga. "We are going to New York for a few days. Can you take on house guests?" Helga sat in the van with headphones on, monitoring the conversation between Max, the suspect, and the delivery driver who was wired. The driver was visibly nervous as Helga looked down from the surveillance scene that was taking place in front of her. She saw a message from Rachel, "Maybe next weekend. Why not take them with you?" Rachel looked down at Lucy as she wagged her tail. Helga returned to her notes as she watched the delivery guy approach the German pharma corporate counsel, Max. She heard the scuff of his boots as he dragged his feet and said, into the microphone, "John, you're doing great." She settled in to hear what they had to say. They had garnered a confession from the combat boot chef and had picked up the delivery driver in the wee hours of the morning. They got lucky when they found messages on his phone that led to Max, the general counsel John delivery driver. "They have arrested Mark," he said, as he grabbed Max. "What was in the package you had me deliver?" "Light. Look, it's none of your business. Just lay low for a few days," John said through gritted teeth. "Lay low. I am on camera driving into that fortress and the housekeeper spoke to me directly. I am the one they're going to come for next. What have you got me into? I've never seen plants like that before." Helga said into the microphone, "John, easy now. Try to get him to admit to the crime." The delivery driver said to Max, "Were these plants supposed to harm someone? Is that why the chef was arrested?" "Fine. Yes, they're meant to harm someone." He pulls a wad of cash from his breast pocket and says, "Here, take this. It will tide you over for a few days." A few days? The woman runs a major company in Berlin. There is no few days. This was simply a scare tactic. Someone would get hurt. She would return to the States, and I would be promoted to CEO. CEO? Are you insane? If they question you, just say you simply delivered a package. I mean, for God's sake, how are you to know what was inside? You told me it was just flowers and plants. It's an exotic flower. One taste, and you're paralyzed.
he answered with a menacing glint in his eye. Paralyzed? Are you fucking insane? Angrily, I have been at that company for years, and now I am being bossed around by her.
Look, I will get you some more cash. Now just shut up and lay low for a few days. Helga removes her headphones and turns to her fellow officers in the van.
We've got him. Let's move in and make the arrest. The surveillance team exits the van and moves in to arrest Max. Helga reads Max his rights.
Max, you're under arrest for attempted murder. As the plane began its descent in New York, Rachel looks at her phone beeping with incoming messages. She sees one from Helga and turns her phone camera to snap a picture of Max and Lucy sitting on the floor peacefully next to Elise and sends it to Helga.
They look so well behaved.
They are well behaved. By the way, you will need to hire a new corporate counsel. I'll tell you more when you get back.
She glanced at Elise, sleeping peacefully with the dogs at her feet, and typed back, understood. She had always had her suspicions about Max, but had decided to give him enough rope to incriminate himself. The dinner party celebration had been a tightly monitored affair, and only intercompany personnel had been aware that it was to be held at her residence. So when the news came that someone had tried to harm her, she realized that it had to be someone from within. She leaned over and gently rubbed Elise's shoulder. We are here.
Yeah.
She stifled a yawn. Sorry, I fell asleep. She pushed her hand out and rubbed Lucy by the neck. Should we go to your parents and drop off the pups? She asked.
Sounds good. Let's.
Rachel took Max and Lucy for a quick run through the neighborhood. Max and Lucy were both excited to be out and about, their tails wagging as they trotted along. As they made their way back, they heard the sound of a car pulling up beside them. Rachel was surprised to see her old friend Allison smiling from the driver's seat. "Hey, stranger," Allison said. Rachel's face lit up with joy. "Allison," she exclaimed. The car door opened and out came Allison's daughter, Sasha. "Aunt Rachel," she shouted, running over and giving Rachel a big hug. Rachel held onto her tightly and smiled down at Sasha. "I've missed you," she said. Allison explained that she and Sasha had been on their way to visit Sasha's grandfather when they spotted her running with the dogs. Allison asked, "How long are you here for?" "Not too long," Rachel replied. "We just decided to come over for the weekend. Do you both have time to come up to the house? Elise is here," she said to Allison. "Allison, let me just drop off the snacks with Dietrich and Wilhelm, and then I can come over." Sasha asked her mom, "Can I walk back with Aunt Rachel? I want to play with Max and Lucy." Allison looked up to Rachel, who nodded and said, "Okay." She opened the door from the side and walked to the rear garden. "Look who I found," she said as she released the pups. Elise and her mom looked up. "Ah, Sasha," they exclaimed as they got up to give her a hug. Allison was coming for coffee, and her dad walked out. Sasha went to give him a hug. As she looked over to her mom, she noticed that she signaled to her father. She looked over at Elise, and then back to her father. Rachel asked, "What is it? Is there something you want to tell me?" as she walked over to the coffee machine. Just then, Allison crossed into the backyard with Dietrich and Wilhelm in tow. Elise walked into the kitchen and said, "I will make the tea." Dietrich stood beside her as Wilhelm stopped to speak to the dogs in German, saying, "They are beautiful." Sasha excitedly patted the dogs as she switched to speaking German to her grandpa. Dietrich turned to her and said, "Ah, a chip off the old block." "You are looking good," she said. "Yes." Dietrich's eyes turned to Allison, who was speaking quietly with Elise. "Things weren't so great this past month. I'm glad to see you." Rachel glanced up at Allison, noting the beanie she was wearing. "Dietrich, an infection, they say." Jonathan had been working around the clock. He pointed to her father. Rachel moved to open the pastry bin and said, "Elise brought this cake back from Berlin. Let's have that with the tea."
They set up the table with pastry, coffee, tea, and chocolate milk. And everyone moved to sit, laughing, as Sasha commanded the two dogs to sit on her side.
Wilhelm took a bite of the cake and said, "This reminds me of home." Elise smiled and said, "We brought it from Berlin. The pastries, they are simply wonderful." Dietrich looked up and said, "It's been almost a year. When do you see yourself returning?" Elise looked over at Rachel and said, "We have been discussing that. Perhaps I should make a soft return. I've been enjoying the research, but I miss my work at the hospital." Jonathan looked at Rachel and asked, "Can you manage being out of the office?" Rachel excused herself and went to the other room. Jonathan looked over at Elise with a frown. Elise shrugged her shoulders. There had been an incident the past weekend. She looked over at Sasha, indicating that they could not discuss it. Allison got up and walked after Rachel, following her into the study and sitting as she wrapped up her call. Rachel sat in silence, staring blankly at the books on the shelves as Allison spoke. Her college roommate's voice was soft and measured, but the words cut through Rachel like a knife. Rachel's eyes welled up with tears as she turned to Allison. "Have you spoken to Elise?" Allison shook her head. "I think Jonathan discussed it with her, but I'm not sure." Rachel replied determinedly, "We can't give up. We'll find a way. We'll try new treatments. Anything, I'll do whatever it takes." Allison smiled weakly and took Rachel's hand. "We have decided to travel for a few months. Dietrich has arranged to take time off from the firm, and we are leaving for the Far East when Jonathan gives me the clearance." Rachel, looking up and seeing the enormity of Allison's decision, asked, "And what about Sasha?" "Catherine has agreed to keep an eye on her. She will live with Wilhelm while we are away." Just then, Elise walked into the room, patting Rachel on the back and going to sit by Allison, taking her hand. "We are here for you," she said, as she gave her hand a squeeze.
Frank, do you have a moment?
Of course, Rachel. What's on your mind?
I wanted to ask you about the junior associate who worked on the recent transaction. Is he available for the next few months?
I believe he is. Why do you ask?
We need to review the activities in the legal team and train a new corporate counsel. I was thinking that he would be the perfect candidate for the job.
I see.
Well, he does have a good amount of experience with corporate transactions and is a quick learner. I think he would be a great fit for the role.
That's great to hear. Can you let me know if he's available and when we can schedule a meeting to discuss further?
Let me get him up here now. He buzzes his assistant and asks her to find Otto.
Thank you, Frank. I appreciate it. She gets up to leave.
No problem, Rachel. Let me know if there's anything else I can do to help. As Rachel walked out of Frank's office, she decided to take a left and go by the park. As she came around the corner, she saw a moving truck and an elderly lady with a box of papers in her hand. She rushed to help, sensing that the box was going to fall any minute, noticing the worry etched on her face as she struggled to hold on to the box of papers. "Let me help you with that," Rachel said, as she reached out to take the box from her. The woman looked up at Rachel with grateful eyes. "Thank you, dear. We are moving offices, and it's been quite a task." Rachel smiled. "It's no problem at all. I'll help you carry these papers inside." She stopped and looked up at the building, feeling a spark of excitement in her chest. It was a beautiful structure, with sleek lines and large windows that would allow for plenty of natural light. The woman thanked Rachel again and introduced herself as Mrs. Thompson. "I couldn't have done it without your help," Mrs. Thompson said as she put the box of papers on the car seat. "It's not easy moving at my age, but I'm determined to make a new start." Rachel asked, "Why are you moving?" Mrs. Thompson replied, "Well, I want to go down to Florida. All my friends have moved south, and I have decided that it is time. The brokers will come later and try to get the building sold." As Rachel turned to leave, she noticed a man standing a few feet away, watching them intently. He was dressed in a dark suit and had a sharp look in his eyes. Rachel couldn't help but feel a sense of unease as she walked away from him. She turned to glance back and saw that he was still staring at her. Rachel quickened her pace and made her way towards Central Park, feeling as though she was being followed. She stopped at a bench and sat down,
taking deep breaths to calm her nerves. Suddenly, the man appeared, standing just a few feet away.
Rachel could feel her heart pounding in her chest as she tried to remain calm. "Can I help you with something?" she asked, trying to sound confident. The man looked at her for a moment before speaking. "I was just admiring your bag." "It's Hermes, isn't it?" Rachel felt a small sense of relief and nodded. "Yes, it is." The man smiled. "I'm a fan of Hermes myself. I'm a collector of sorts." Rachel smiled back, feeling more at ease. "I'm Rachel," she said, holding out her hand. The man took it and introduced himself as Tom. They chatted for a few minutes, and Rachel found herself drawn to his charm and intelligence. Tom mentioned that he worked in finance and had an interest in art. He asked if she would like to go to an exhibition with him that evening. Rachel hesitated for a moment before accepting his offer as they walked away from the park. Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. She glanced back at the moving truck and wondered what was really going on with Mrs. Thompson in the building. The camera zooms out to show the New York skyline and the scene ends. "Do you own the building?" "Yes, we used to have a hosiery business and we ran everything from here." "Wow, that is incredible. Do you mind if I take a look?" She points to the building interior, Mrs. Thompson. She looks her up and down, then lets me have the property manager give you a tour. She walks in and asks the receptionist to get John, the property manager, as she shows Rachel the interior of the lobby. Rachel felt her heart pounding with excitement as a middle-aged man named John walked her through the building, pointing out the various features and amenities. She could already envision the possibilities as she took in the sprawling ceiling on the top floors with views of Central Park. She picked up her phone and called Frank. "Rachel, I was just about to call you," he began. "Frank, hold on a second," she said, looking over at Mrs. Thompson. "Frank, I am buying an office building." She gave him the address. "Can you get the documents done as soon as possible?" "What about due diligence?" "I'm here now. I suppose a few things will need fixing. Let me discuss the terms with the owner's representative. But in the meantime, let's get all the standard paperwork." "Cash deal." Good point. Yeah, let's do a cash deal. I will have Neil make a dividend payment from German Pharma, so set up another entity that will hold the real estate." Rachel hung up and walked over to Mrs. Thompson, looking at John and said, "Have you received an opinion of value from the real estate broker?" As Rachel waited for John's response, she took in the former factory space.
The space was vast and airy, with high ceilings and large windows that allowed natural light to flood in. She could see the potential for an open-plan workspace, with plenty of room for collaboration and creative thinking. John looked at Rachel and nodded. "Yes, we have received an opinion of value from the broker. Would you like to see it?" Rachel nodded eagerly, and John led her to a small conference room where he pulled out a folder filled with papers. Rachel leaned forward as John began to explain the various calculations and projections. As John spoke, Rachel's mind raced with possibilities. She could see herself and her team working here, creating innovative solutions and disrupting industries. She could see the potential for growth and expansion, for building a company that would change the world. Finally, John finished his explanation, and Rachel thanked him for his time. She made a mental note to follow up with the broker and see if there was any room for negotiation. As she walked out of the building, Rachel felt a sense of elation. This was it. This was the place where she would make her mark. She smiled to herself, knowing that the hard work was just beginning.
but feeling confident that she had made the right decision. Mrs. Thompson looked at Rachel with a shrewd eye and said, "I have. They say it's worth $45 million. She then pointed to John and said, "Give her the schedule." John opened a folder and handed Rachel a summary sheet. He then said, "I also have an inspection report in my office which I can give to you." Rachel looked at the paper, nodded, and looked around. She then looked Mrs. Thompson in the eye and said, "How about $30 million?" Mrs. Thompson mulled it over and pointed to John and the receptionist and said, "And you keep the staff?" Rachel looked over at John and said, "I can do that." John called the broker and canceled the meeting. She pulled Rachel by the elbow and said, "Come on, let's go have a cup of tea." Rachel laughed and called Frank. "The price is $30 million also. Prepare an employment contract for the property manager and a receptionist." "Okay, I can have this done in 2 days." "Sounds good. She wants to go to Florida. I have a contractor who is very good. If he can come by today or tomorrow, that would be great. Let me see, I will send his details." Her phone pinged as she followed Mrs. Thompson into her old office. She looked down at the antique desk and asked, "Are you taking the desk to Florida?" "No, this used to belong to my husband. My kids have no interest. They're on the West Coast. We were just putting the furniture in storage. Anything you want, you can have." Rachel rubbed her hand over the top, feeling the grain. "Are you sure?" she asked. The desk was a warm walnut.
Rachel, John the property manager, and Jeff the architect are touring the building, walking through the empty space and admiring the high ceilings, exposed brick walls, and large windows. Jeff says in awe, "This is amazing, all these original details." Rachel exclaims excitedly, "I know, it's exactly what I was hoping for." John proudly adds, "We're glad you like it." The building has been well maintained over the years, and we're excited to see it come back to life. Jeff nods and remarks, "Absolutely, Rachel. I want us to emphasize the details and bring in as much natural light as possible. We can start by restoring the original hardwood floors in the executive offices and exposing the brick walls in the main entrance." Impressed? That's a great idea. On the heavy traffic areas, I would like for you to incorporate some tile work. I also want a bank of floors dedicated to the research team, with their own access elevators and interior stairs between the floors. John nodded. "That sounds great. I have the original floor plans in my office." Rachel then asked, "John, can you make the second floor space dedicated to Jeff's team? You both will be working closely together over the next few months." Jeff thoughtfully replied, "For the offices, I was thinking of incorporating large windows to let in plenty of natural light, while also preserving the original moldings and trim." John smiled. "That's an excellent idea, Jeff. And for the common areas, we can use a neutral color palette to keep things cohesive and modern." Rachel chimed in, "I love it. And what about the rooftop? Can we turn that into a green space or outdoor seating area?" Jeff eagerly responded, "Absolutely. We can create a beautiful outdoor terrace with a stunning view of Central Park. We can add greenery, comfortable seating, and even a small kitchenette for employee use." Rachel beamed. "Perfect. Let's make it happen." As they continued the tour, Rachel couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and excitement. This building would be the new home for her growing company, and she knew that with Jeff and John's expertise, it would be transformed into a beautiful and functional workspace. She could already envision her team collaborating in the open concept offices and enjoying breaks on the rooftop terrace. As they walked out of the building, Rachel turned to Jeff and John. "Thank you both for your time today. I'm excited to get started on this project." Jeff replied, "The pleasure is ours, Rachel. We can't wait to see the final result."
Rachel excitedly said, "I love it. Here's a list of things I want to have happen. As you can see, I want all the systems to be replaced with brand new mechanical and electrical ones. I also want a separate bank of elevators for the executive suites and for the research team. When you have all the systems in place, Noah will come and run a separate security system with backup generators. Jeff, you can contact me anytime, but John will work closely with you as he knows the building best. John, you will need to contact members of the research team and see if they want any particular designs incorporated, and if they want to keep some of the furniture. Lastly, gentlemen, put some spark into the parking garage. I hate a dark garage."
Smiling. Me too. I think this building has a lot of potential. Let's get to work. He points to John and says, "We will make you proud."
Nods, surprised that Rachel had put him in charge, given that she had just met him yesterday. He wondered what Mrs. Thompson had said on his behalf. He points Jeff to his office. "I have the floor plans. Let's go take a look and make a plan." Nods as Rachel walks off. "Who will oversee the budget?" he asks. "John, I don't think there is a budget. How much do you think it will run?"
Let me get the mechanical and electrical guys out here. I have some folks that work fast. What about you?
"I can get the elevator guy. We should ask this Noah fella what type of generators he wants so we can make a slot for them."
How is the roof?
"I think it is solid. We can get the roofer to do an inspection. We can go up and look when you're ready. There's no evidence of leaks, but it wouldn't hurt to reinforce if you're doing all this." They turned their attention to the floor plan as Jeff studied the areas that Rachel wanted to gut. He pointed to the 3rd, 4th, and 5th floors. It looked like the ceiling here was higher. They must have done some work to reduce the height.
That used to be administrative offices, so when they changed the lighting system, they also lowered the ceiling. Jeff pulled out his laptop and started to make notes as they talked. Going back from the floor plans to Rachel's summary sheet, after an hour he got up and said, "I think I have a good starting point. Let's reconnect tomorrow. I'll come back with the systems people, and they can provide a better timeline for that aspect." The two men shook hands, and Jeff went back to his office to continue work on the designs.
"We should spend more time in New York," Rachel said to Elise over dinner. "If I leave on Sunday night, I can fly back Wednesday night. That'll give me 3 full days in a week to work in Berlin and 3 days in New York." Elise nodded thoughtfully before responding. "It sounds like a solid plan," she said.
Well, it's grilled and strawberry wraps. So Mr. Tommy Pond just said you realize over at Vortrein Massanger, then Vanya comes to Tielensteiner. I'm wrong, you hold anything to learn about that. So she sends runs deep too. That have to find Majuri if you realize from there anything you know the way to let complete for sure. If I'm of the last ride, I know everything Mrs. is trying to come back and that country, and to falsely mine, your record, queer walk, as I want. So,
her gaze turning towards the window. "When are you planning to roll out this masterpiece?" "Otto will begin working with the legal team," Rachel replied. "He's going to fly back with us, but we'll be staying at a hotel near the office." Elise nodded. "That's a great idea," she said. "I think it's important that we make sure he has all the resources he needs to adjust quickly. I have left John and Jeff in charge of the renovations on the new office building." She continued, "Oh, I forgot. You will need to go by and see how you want the research floors to be designed. Give me a Persian garden for my office. Jean-Marie can work on the designs for the research floor," she told Rachel. "Okay, when I come back, I will have her come with me," Rachel said. "It would be good for her," Elise added. Just then, the doorbell rang. "That should be Noah and Jesse," Rachel said as she got up and moved to the door. She looked through the security monitor and opened the door to her friends.
"What smells nice? Don't tell me Elise cooked."
"Rachel actually made her famous chili here. Try it. You want some?"
"Looking into the steaming pot of meats and beans. Wow, absolutely."
He reaches for a spoon and grabs a chair.
"It's good." "No, what do you want to drink?"
"Anything. What do you have?"
"Beer, wine, you name it."
"I'll take the beer." "Jesse, looking at are you drinking?" Elise points to the bottle on the table. "I'll go with the wine."
"We are gut renovating an office building near the park. I need you to work with the architect on the systems and the electronics."
His head bouncing from Jesse to Elise, then back to Rachel.
"You're moving back?"
"The building will take a few months to get ready.
but being in New York is better for Elise's work, and we can juggle a traveling schedule for a few months.
Noted. I can go over tomorrow and take a look around to get a better understanding of the scope.
Sure. Here is the number for John. Here she says as she hands him a summary sheet. This is what I told them I wanted to change. You can add to it as you see fit.
Looking from Elise to Rachel, do we need to check out John?
You can if you like, but according to the former owner, Mrs. Thompson, he has been working there forever.
Tapping a few keys, okay? And who else?
There is a receptionist named Gloria.
Okay, got it. She looked up.
Jeff is the architect, referred by our attorney Frank. Elise looks down at the summary. The lower floors will be for research, and the upper floors will be executive offices. We will have a handful of floors in the middle, possibly getting to medical offices or other entrepreneurial ventures.
Hard thing or keep and worse started. Of worse the tensions to a fury down everything braces. And the film lost me won't be ever one to rounds cause situation. To see within your accents. Oh, what's more strat of a country said, with victorious and Fort Alvis tension. And the curious Sioux ride and the flinkly and repatient this is life. What is if you creative your light is thought the boreal brown around this lockeyed and impress him so if your notion of your aim to get the veal liver is, but we had a look he thingless and teen to it. You dreams like gorgeous time this.
So I was thinking that the research floors should have their own server that connects to all the offices. So working here or in Berlin would be seamless. Jesse looks over and says, that is a great idea. The location is great. It's walking distance to the hospital and your apartment. Noah adds yes, with fantastic views of the park. Elise smiles as she hugs Jesse and says, I am so happy that you could come over. Jesse replies, yeah. I am actually getting posted, so I leave New York in about a month. Rachel inquires, where are they sending you? Jesse responds, the Far East. A lot is happening. A friend of mine is going there soon. Well, for different reasons, perhaps you can help me out and keep an eye on her? Jesse tapped her screen, asking what the friend's name was. Allison in Dietrich Port. Rachel said Jesse looked up. He is a fund manager. Rachel nodded, yes, but Allison has a bucket list, so Dietrich is taking some time off, and they will leave when she receives clearance from the hospital. Jesse looked at Elise, who nodded quietly. Sure, she said, looking at Rachel, give them my cell and we can touch base when they get in. I'm sure the expat community is pretty tight-knit. Rachel nodded. Yeah, sure, she said, as she got up and moved to shake Noah's hand. If you'll excuse me, I have an early call in the morning, and I need a few hours of shut-eye. Jesse looked at Elise. You want us to head out? No, let's catch up. It takes her a while to wind down. Another beer, Noah. Sure, he answered. Let me get it. He pointed to the wine. No, I'm good. Jesse said, looking at her half-filled glass. Elise suggested, let's sit on the couch. Jesse asked, when are you returning? We stayed a few more days than we anticipated, so I think perhaps Saturday or Sunday. She replied, are you going to try the 3-on-3-off work schedule? Not sure how that works in a medical setting, she said with raised eyebrows, but it appears that I will be spending more time in the States going forward. Noah exclaimed, ooh. Jesse looked at Elise. What? He asked. It's not what you think, Elise explained. There was another attack, this time from the corporate counsel, so she is going to put Otto from the law firm in that group and hope to groom a junior associate named Nate, who is actually terrific. I think she is tired of the attacks and getting worn down from the constant need to ensure that someone does not kill us. Noah exclaimed, fuck. Jesse looked at Elise. Yeah, that sounds rough, he said. Other than that, things are great. We launched a new product. Noah, way to go, Elise. Trust me, it's not all me, but thanks. See, I told you. Nobel Prize. The friends laughed, then settled down to enjoy spending time together.
Rachel and Jonathan walk down the hospital corridor. Rachel says, I'm thinking of running over and getting the pups so that we can leave first thing in the morning. Jonathan replies, it was a really great idea to bring them. Sasha has really enjoyed playing with them in the evenings. He then stops talking and turns to block her view. Rachel asks, Dad, what is it? She then looks up and sees a red-headed woman with her body pressed up against Elise. Elise is staring at the woman's lips with a look of longing on her face. Rachel stands there, transfixed, watching the scene unfold and whispering, ooh. Jonathan looks around nervously and says, let's go back to my office as he puts his hand on her elbow.
Rachel asks, "What?" She then takes out her phone and discreetly turns on the video recording function, capturing the image as it unfolds. Jonathan whispered, "Don't do this to yourself." He watched as the red-headed woman turned around and Rachel quickly snapped a picture with her phone. Rachel muttered, "Got it, Dad. I'll call you later," and bolted for the side exit door leading to the staircase. Jonathan looked around him, lost his daughter and his mentee had seemed like a match made in heaven. He turned back to his office and closed the door, lost in thought. He wondered if he had pushed Elise to date his daughter. His mind flashed back to Catherine prodding him to introduce them at the ceremony that the hospital had held in his honor. Rachel had been spending most of her time working overseas, and Catherine had been worried that she wouldn't settle down. He had missed the opportunity when Rachel and Dietrich had left early, and he had gotten an earful from Catherine that his protege would leave for greener pastures. The circumstances of the meeting had been far from ideal. Dietrich, Rachel's childhood friend, had just brought his wife Allison to the hospital for treatment. Jonathan knew that Rachel would seek to spend as much time with Allison while she was undergoing treatment, so he had taken the opportunity and assigned Elise to the care of Allison. He looked down at his desk, thinking that he was now in a difficult position. His daughter seldom expressed her emotions. He turned his chair and looked out the window as he placed a call to Catherine.
Hello.
"Jonathan,"
Rachel may be coming over.
he began.
Yes. She is pulling up now.
"What is it?
She may be upset.
Why? Has something happened to Allison?"
No, Allison is fine.
"Then what? Tell me later," she whispered as she saw Rachel bending down to pat the dogs.
You're early, she said to Rachel.
"Yes," she hugged Max and Lucy.
Do you have time for coffee?
"I thought I would just grab them now," she gestured to the pups, "so I can fly out early."
Catherine asked, "Early? I thought you were going to leave Sunday. Did you change your mind?" She pointed to the chair. "I just made the coffee." She picked up the carafe and began to pour. She noticed that Rachel looked forlorn and wondered what it was that Jonathan was trying to tell her. As she picked up the cup, Rachel asked, "Mom, did you ever think about being with someone else other than Dad?" "Someone else? Are you not happy with Elise?" "Well, you know, she raised an eyebrow. "I thought you were too busy with all the different projects. When would you have time for a mistress?" Just then, her phone rang. She picked it up and then turned it over. But Catherine saw the missed caller picture as Elise. Catherine said, "Rachel, you know it's not easy being the wife of a successful doctor. Everyone wants a piece of what you have without understanding the hard work, dedication, and the late nights. Take your dad. I'm sure women throw themselves at him all the time." She paused and looked off in the distance. "You just have to pick your battles." She picked up a chocolate and snapped her fingers to Max and Lucy as she walked back to the car. Catherine watched her put the pups in the back seat and wondered what had brought on the melancholy. As Rachel drove back, she decided to stop at the office building. She called Jeff and told him that she wanted the 2 top floors to be designed as a luxury residence with an interior staircase between the floors. She pulled up to the building and took the elevator to the top floor, sitting at Mrs. Thompson's antique desk. She placed a call to Helga and looked out the window. Helga asked, "Are you back already?" "No, I haven't left yet. I may make another stop. Can you scan a picture for me?"
Sure. Are you sending it now? Taps her phone.
"I just did."
Looks down and sees the woman just in front of Elise.
Who is right? Who is she?"
Give me a second. She taps a few keys to run the recognition software. Celine Jarvie. She just completed a fellowship at Johns Hopkins and is working at... Well, isn't that something?
"Yes."
Looks like she and Elise go way back and they now work at the same hospital. She seems to be quite brilliant.
"Good."
Rachel, you know these things blow over. Just give it time.
"Yes, I suppose so." She looked out the window as she hung up. She remembered their meeting as if it was yesterday. Elise walking towards her, then tripping on the sidewalk and spilling her coffee on Rachel's white shirt. Mortified, Elise started to apologize profusely, but Rachel just chuckled and brushed it off.
They soon started talking, with Rachel smiling at Elise's stories about her move to the city. After a few hours, they decided to part ways, but not before exchanging numbers. She was lost in thought until she felt Lucy pushing her nose into her hand. She looked down and said, "Okay, girl, let's get going." As she got up to leave, Allison called. "Hi," she said. "I have clearance to travel." "That's great," she said with a smile. "When do you leave?" "I want to go now, but Dietrich is tied up on a transaction for a few more days." She picked up her keys and looked around. "Why don't we go? He can always come when he is free." "You? I thought you were flying back this weekend? You have time?" Looking around at the empty office building, "Seems like I'm going to be free." "Why do you sound—" She paused. "Has something happened?" "No. But how about we go to Thailand? I have a private jet, you know." "That would be incredible. It would be like that spring break trip we took back in college." "Okay, my backpack has been packed for weeks now. When can we leave?" Rachel taps a few keys to alert the pilot that she wants to fly tonight, and her voice rises with merriment as she says, "Let's do it." As she walks out of the office building, Rachel goes to the apartment to get a few of her things. She looks down at her watch and is surprised to see that it is only 3:30 in the afternoon. Good, she thinks. Elise will still be at the hospital. She still needs time to process, and the day is starting to feel unreal. She looks down at the pups, wondering if she should leave them in the city or take them with her. Just then, Max walks up and rubs along her leg. "Okay," she says to them, "we all go." She snaps her fingers and loads them back into the SUV. As she drives, she calls the car service to go pick up Allison and take her to the plane. Lets the pups out of the car and walks inside the elevator. As she exits, Lucy sniffs the air and begins a low growl. She pushes her key into the lock and enters the unit. As she walks through, she picks up her tote and begins throwing in essentials. She walks to the bedroom and picks up a carry-all that had some travel clothing. She goes over to the bed and notices the picture of her and Elise. She sits down and writes a note. "Elise, taking a quick flight to Thailand with Allison. The jet is at your disposal if you need to go anywhere. Love always, Rachel." She places the note by the nightstand, picks up her bags, and walks out of the apartment. She turns around and walks into the elevator with the pups behind her. As she pulled up to the plane, she saw Allison all bundled up in a hoodie and sweatpants. "You're prepared," she said as they boarded the plane. Lucy and Max walked to the back rows.
She looked at Allison, who nodded as she sat down by the window. The flight was bumpy. She would fall asleep, and then the plane would hit an air pocket, which would rouse her. Allison miraculously had fallen asleep, so she was left with her thoughts. She couldn't stop the flashbacks of Elise, sitting next to her, running her hand along her arm while leaning in close and saying, "I've been wanting you since I saw you this morning." But instead of her and Elise, her mind just replayed Elise kissing the red-haired woman. She got up to check on Allison and stretch her legs. The stewardess smiled and asked if she wanted something, so she took some water and returned to her seat. Helga's words echoed, "These things blow over. Just give it time." She looked out the window as a tear rolled down her cheeks. Elise walked through the apartment as she got home and felt that something was off. She walked into the bedroom, placed her watch on the nightstand, and saw a note. She read it, looked down at her phone, and read it again. She had not received any messages or calls from Rachel all day. As she walked back into the living room, clutching the note, she saw Rachel's tote bag and laptop were missing. She opened the side closet door and saw her favorite jacket, and a few pieces of clothing were also gone. Everything was neat and in its place. She sat down. They were supposed to leave for Berlin over the weekend. She looked back at the note, seeing the line, "The jet is at your disposal if you need to go anywhere." She placed the note on the table, turned off the lights, and went to the bedroom. She was exhausted. First, Celine had shown up in her office, stating she was now on the surgery team at the hospital. Jonathan had been acting strange most of the day, with his office door closed, and now this. She stretched out on the bed with her phone in her hand and opened her messaging app to Rachel. "I understand you want to spend as much time with Allison, but when are you coming back?" She saw the 3 blinking buttons at the text message and looked at the time, letting go of the phone before dozing off. She awoke to the sound of the New York City garbage truck. It was different sleeping alone. She glanced at the clock and picked up her phone. 5:15 a.m. No messages from Rachel. Unbelievable, she muttered and got up, walking into the kitchen.
She browsed through the tea before deciding on coffee and pressing the button to grind the beans. As she waited for the coffee, she texted Jesse, "You up?" "Jesse, maybe. Let's have lunch if you're free." "Sure. See you at 11:45 at the corner grill." "Sure." She walked into the shower, deciding that she might as well go to the hospital. Later that morning, she saw Jonathan. He gave her a quiet smile as she walked up to him.
Jonathan, do you know when Rachel will return? He frowned as he looked down the corridor. Return? Why aren't you both leaving for Berlin this weekend? Elise replied, Rachel and Allison left yesterday for Asia. He looked her in the eye. She felt as if he was asking something else, but he simply said, will you return to Berlin? Elise replied, I am waiting to hear from her, but so far all my calls are going to voicemail. Just then, her alarm went off, alerting her that it was time to go meet Jesse for lunch. Okay, he said as he shrugged his shoulders and walked back to his office. She watched him walk off looking defeated, perhaps a challenging case, she thought to herself as she picked up her bag and left for lunch. She walked into the corner grill and noticed that Jesse was sitting at the table in the back, working on her laptop. Busy day. She asked. Jesse got up to give her a hug. Not too bad, she said. I'm surprised you have time for lunch. I thought you and Rachel would be running around getting ready to leave Elise. About that, it seems Rachel has gone to Asia with Allison. She's not answering her phone. She looks up, surprised. What? She moves her hands in the air. No, they're college roommates and Allison isn't responding well to treatment, so she wanted to travel. Did something happen? Her phone pings with an incoming message, and she looks down to see a text.
Thanks for listening to Devil's Gambit, Book 1, Silent Retaliation. This series is made possible by amazing listeners like you. If you've enjoyed the journey, please like, share, and subscribe. It means the world to us. Check out our artisanal shop for handmade goods and graphic tees, or explore Love is Love album. See you next week for new episodes.